purposes of the record, I want to either have that heard or address that at some point today.
We'll start with that. Chen's in the courtroom. On Mr. McGowan's motion for subpoena, is that information that you would need for this suppression hearing or something later?
The evidence that I am asking for that's contained within that cell phone could be relevant to this proceeding, but it would also be relevant for trial. Ms. Pace testified regarding going to my client's apartment like 3 or 4 times. She couldn't remember 3 or 4. She couldn't remember at which times. And if her cell phone GPS location data is on, that would help explain it. So that's one of the things there. And then there's a lot of questions I asked her where she couldn't remember it because it had been so long. And I think there's information contained in her cell phone that would help show that. I understand Mr. McGowan's point on the subpoena regards to any, First Amendment issue, or I'm sorry, Fifth Amendment issue or things like that. She testified about these things. I think those issues are waived. And I have no problem with the court doing an in-camera inspection. And then if the court deems it relevant, to provide that to the parties.
Well, Mr. McGowan certainly, but you heard on this, that it seems like the Fifth Amendment wouldn't go away just because she testified several times when a defendant gives a statement against his own interest, and that later on the police understand there to be a crime. At that point, the defendant in that situation couldn't, say, or the police couldn't say that the Fifth Amendment has been waived because he gave a statement. It seems more analogous to that.
Judge, I can short circuit this argument. There is no subpoena before the court. Mr. Weiss failed entirely to follow the dictates of Rule 17. He subpoenaed the telephone without prior judicial authorization. He subpoenaed it to his office on a non-court date. There is no subpoena. It was not required that I even file a motion to quash. And I think if the court does review that, it would agree with me. So I think we're putting the cart before the horse in terms of the analysis. I understand why Mr. Weiss would like to get to that, but I think we're skipping over the thing that makes the subpoena itself operative. Right. And so, Judge, that would be my position, that until this is properly noticed and put before the court, there is no need to engage in any conversation about it. There's a need to have established whether it is a enforceable subpoena or not. And I think Mr. Weiss could address the dictates of Rule 17B to determine whether we even need to go to the next phase at this point.
What you're talking about, I would like to discuss the Fifth Amendment issue, because if the Fifth Amendment issue that was raised is correct, then no subpoena would need to be issued, because it would cause Ms. Pace to require her to give up her Fifth Amendment right of self-determination.
That's exactly right. And I agree with the court's analysis. I think that added to which we have a situation here where it is the act of compelling the production of the item that is at issue. That is fundamentally, and I think according to the case law, very different from in-court testimony. What the defense counsel is essentially looking for is all the data from, without limitation, all the data from her phone. That means everything. From a time period, I could read the subpoena from a time period relative to this, okay? And so in order to get to that point, so in terms of her assertion of Fifth Amendment with respect to that, we would need to have an engaged hearing on it. But I think effectively what the case law would say is that merely answering his questions under subpoena at a hearing does not waive her right to what is in that phone. What he's essentially saying is, well, if it shows her movements coming to and from the apartment, it is corroborative. Well, that's true, but that does not, corroborative information is not favorable to the defense so long as Ms. Pace has testified to that, Judge. I think what he is doing is engaging in a fishing expedition in the hope that it's going to show that she was, I don't know, maybe not doing what she had testified to. The reality is that this is such an invasive search that I think even the state would have a very high burden in a search warrant of getting access to what Mr. Weiss is asking for. I think that at the end of the day, Judge, she has a fully fledged Fifth Amendment right in the non-production of that phone, because essentially this is all material that if Mr. Weiss is interested in it, he can attempt to procure it from the providers. And from that perspective, she doesn't have any obligation here. The issue here is self-created by the defense, Judge. They have repeatedly pointed out that Ms. Pace is somehow guilty of a crime in going into Jason Chen's apartment to look for her daughter or information relative to her daughter's disappearance. The defense has repeatedly called that a burglary, a theft, ignoring that, quite frankly, the law of necessity, the common law of necessity, makes it an appropriate action on her part. But leaving that aside, Judge, she's not on trial. But it's the defense that has created this notion that she committed some kind of crime. And in so doing, they have brought to the fore any Fifth Amendment concerns that she might have. Okay? Those were introduced by the defense. So in terms of opening the door to that argument that they're going to have to now surmount, that's on them. So that is one part of the analysis here. The other parts of the analysis go back to the Nixon case, United States versus Nixon, the seminal case, which I know the court is familiar with. And what we're having here is a hearing to address what Mr. Weiss cannot articulate is in that phone, but hopes to find in that phone. And that's not the analysis. The analysis is, can he put forward before the court items that are admissible and relevant to a proceeding? That phone is subpoenaed to the court after court approval of that subpoena. It comes into the bosom of the court. The court then makes a determination after a hearing as to what is relevant, admissible, and identified with specificity. The court can review the Exhibit A to my motion, the subpoena itself, and determine if that's if that description provided there is sufficiently specific. My understanding is if the phone is turned over, the defense has access to the entire phone. They may say, well, we're going to limit our review to these certain dates. Okay. I'm not a forensic telephone guy. Don't even know what the term would be. But I would tell you this, that I don't know if the information within that phone can be isolated between those two search dates. The defense would have to have a forensic expert here who could provide testimony to the court about how that subpoena was going to be satisfied if the court saw fit to provide that subpoena. The court may well say to the forensic expert, are you telling me you can't narrow it to these dates? And the forensic expert says, well, actually it's in files, TikTok, in files as to text messages, in files as to, but no, we can't articulate, we can't narrow the search down to that date. The court may say, well, this is overbroad. We have questions about whether it's unduly burdensome to ask a crime victim.
We're doing just Fifth Amendment.
Well, hey, we're talking about the whole motion. We get a chance to respond.
I haven't had an opportunity to really, I know Mr. McGowan's ready to go. I was prepared for a different hearing today.
Okay.
Well, Judge, he subpoenaed an item to his office improperly, would not notify me whether he was withdrawing the subpoena. I'm ready to go forward today, Judge.
Let's do this. Correct. You get it.
For as much as Mr. McGowan goes that I didn't follow the rules of Rule 17, I know the local rules give me at least a little time to respond to a motion. So I believe that it's not really fair for me to be responding, because I know there's case law that directly contradicts.
And you're not expected to today. This was filed this week. I just didn't know if you wanted to respond to things briefly beforehand. What I'd like to do is to extend examine the Fifth Amendment issue first. That could be dispositive of whether or not it's, you know, the information is accessible through this space. And if it is, then we can argue the technical nuances. To look, Mr. Weisler gave time to look at that. I think surely it's the first time the United States, potential defendant's been asked to give information through subpoena and this issue is raised. Maybe so, I'm surprised, but surely there's other guidance out there.
Certainly, Judge. Your Honor, could we set this matter for a hearing?
Yes, absolutely.
And I don't know if the court wants to take that up now or just set it at the end after this, because we could put, there's going to be a fourth hearing on the motion to suppress. We could put those on the same date.
And the reason I want to bring it up first, I didn't know the timing was something where you wanted this information for today's hearing or not. So apparently you can proceed today without
Yes,
the
Your Honor.
information. Certainly.
That's right.
Other parties in the suppression matter have an idea of when the next hearing after today will be.
There's a portion of the defendant's motion, which is section 3, that the state has not yet responded to. The reason why is because some of that section may be dispositive based on the court's rulings on section 1 and 2. So it depends at this point, but I know that the state could respond to section 3 if need be after the court's rulings on 1 and 2 within a couple of weeks. So I would say 30 days, 45 days.
Yes, Your Honor, and I agree with all that. It really comes down, I don't know, I make no presumptions at all, if the court intends to make an oral ruling today or take the matter under advisement. So I would just set it for 2 or 3 weeks after the court would plan to have an opinion read, if that's the way the court is
We
going.
can do it that way. I didn't know if you wanted to, kind of splice the motion. We can certainly. I do understand the point of whether if sections 1 and 2 are deemed granted, that would certainly change the posture of how section 3 is handled. If they're overruled, we proceed a different way. And that's what the parties would prefer. That makes sense to minimize the amount of preparation you have to do.
Exactly.
I wasn't planning on ruling from the bench today. I would like to review the transcript of the first hearing as well. So probably we can pick a date about 60 days out after today. If the parties want to provide any supplemental authority during that time, based on what comes out today as well, feel free to do that. And so that the date after that will be, I guess, where you're requesting me to hear the motion of Washington, if necessary.
Yes, Your Honor.
I'm looking in July. Fridays work for the party. We can keep having hearings on Fridays. Look at Friday, July the 19th.
That's fine, Judge, for me.
If we could do the week before, if at all possible. I'm supposed to be in a trial here the very next week, and I try to keep that Friday.
I was supposed to be in Peru.
I'm happy to work around Mr. McGowan's schedule.
So you said the 12th is not good for you.
I can't do it, Judge.
How about 26th?
Supposed to be in trial here, Judge, but
With,
I don't imagine that's going to be a 4-day trial.
we could do the Monday before the 22nd. If that works.
No, no, I'm sorry, Judge.
August 2.
I'm supposed to be in Marion County, Judge.
And I'll be in trial in Division 2 that week.
Monday, July 29th.
That's fine, Judge.
I can't do that, I'm sorry.
Okay. July 22.
That's the day before trial.
That's fine, Judge.
The 15th available, Judge?
Hearing already that day, so it works for them. Monday, July 15th.
Play free games and you could win money. Play this month's featured game for a chance to win $100 or $1,000. Play daily to get additional entries for a chance to win $1,000. Remember, play daily. Go to the Game Center on our website and you could win money.
Joe Singleton, pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church, Willingston, South Carolina, will provide the scripture and
What about August 5th, Judge?
If everyone else can do the 12th, I will be here. I will be sleepy. I will be here. I can make that work.
You're always on your A games.
No,
August 5th,
sleepier than usual.
August 5th works. Or July 5th.
I defer to the parties.
August 5th, Judge, please.
Yeah.
It's fine. It's the day before trial, but it doesn't matter.
Don't know if that works for you.
Yes, Your Honor.
Morning of August 5th, for the next hearing necessary. At that point, we'll take up section 3 and the motion clause.
Thank you, Ron. May I be excused?
Yes, sir. Ready to continue the suppression hearing?
Yes, Your Honor.
Housekeeping. There were some exhibits that were supposed to be like live, but I can't have. I don't know if the court reporter received those yet. Have you seen those yet? Okay, unless you're going to do the first of the day officers at some point, please provide those to the court reporter. And what's the next exhibit number you have there?
Number 8 will be next.
It will be next.
Your Honor, the body cam videos were attached as part of the motion. Did you not get a chambers copy?
Pat did that, they weren't how many they were admitted as exhibits according to court order, but we can go ahead and admit those if you wish.
Yes.
Hard copies for the file.
Yes, Your Honor. We'll get a CD over to the board.
When my last met, as exhibit 8 has a body cam of some kind, I don't know if actually there's an officer justice's testimony. You're saying exhibit 8 is the next one you need to have? We'll start with 8 now. All right, next witness.
Defense calls Mr. Seach. I'm not sure his position.
Can you hear us, Mr. Seach?
I can, Your Honor.
Raise your right hand, please.
Do you solemnly swear affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I swear.
Good morning. Can you please state your name?
Yes, sir. It's Joseph Seach.
And do you have a current title or position?
Yes, I'm the Veteran Affairs Coordinator at the Very County United Way of Veteran Affairs in Hastings, Michigan.
Okay. Is it okay I call you Mr. Seach?
That's fine, sir.
Okay. Mr. Seach, my name is Joshua Weiss. I represent Jason Chen. Were you involved in an investigation involving Mr. Chen?
I was, yes, sir.
Okay. And at that time, what was your position?
I was a homicide detective. I was in the Violent Crimes Bureau at the Police Department.
And how long had you been with the Chattanooga Police Department at that time?
Since June of 2017.
Okay. And you're obviously no longer with the Chattanooga Police Department?
That's
Is there a reason that you left the police department?
I'm originally from Michigan. It was just kind of time for me to move back up towards family.
Understood. Prior to your investigation involving Jason Chen, had you worked on other homicide cases before?
That's correct, sir.
Had you, are you familiar with the Tennessee process of obtaining a search warrant?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Can you
I apologize. This one need to be taken into custody? Yeah, this was. Do you need, is he cuffed now? You welcome, sir. Always, Mr. Weiss, I heard that familiar sound.
Thank you for your patience, Mr. Siege. Can you, so you learned how to obtain a search warrant through what process?
So once you go through the interview process, if you select for the homicide, you make good for a 6-month training period, work with 3 seasoned detectives, each for a 2-month period. We'll go through teaching you, all the ins and outs of working in the capacity of an homicide detective during that time. It's kind of ad nauseum gone over the process of obtaining and returning a search warrant.
And prior to this event, how many affidavits for search warrant had you drafted?
Oh goodness. I honestly couldn't give you a solid number. I mean, I would a lot. I would say probably, I had to guess, maybe somewhere upwards in the neighborhood of 100, maybe.
So can you just generally, in a nutshell, kind of explain the process that a law enforcement goes through in drafting an affidavit and then obtaining a search warrant and everything that's entailed?
That's correct. So necessary information is procured. The search warrant affidavit is drafted. We would always go through a process of having at least one other person proofread the search warrant just to make sure there were no grammatical, spelling errors, or any just gross errors that were noticed. Once the search warrant was written and okayed, it would be taken before a judge or a magistrate. That was often dependent on the time of day and the availability of the judge and or magistrate. Once signed off, the search warrant would be executed. Any evidence that was procured would be documented by crime scene and turned into Chattanooga Police Department property. The items would be, or the evidence of the seizure would be itemized and then returned to the judge or magistrate, signed that with a search warrant return.
Now I want to, I appreciate that, thank you. I want to talk to you about the search warrant that you obtained in the matter involving the investigation of Jason Chen. Do you remember obtaining a search warrant?
I do, yes, sir.
Okay. Tell me, what was your involvement in the investigation prior to obtaining the search warrant?
So I was called in by Crawford, looking to notify matter to act as a secondary. Went into the office from my residence in Dixon and sat with Detective Crawford along with our supervisor and a number of other individuals as the victim's mother was interviewed. And then went to my office and began drafting the search warrant.
So did you draft the affidavit for search warrant?
That's correct, yes, sir.
Did you draft it alone?
I was the one who wrote it. I mean, Detective Crawford would come in if anything new came up, also just to kind of see where I was at, kind of read through, make sure, we were all on the same page regarding the search warrant.
Okay. And you said earlier, generally, you have someone look over and make sure there's no errors, grammatical errors, things like that. Did anyone do that in this case?
That's correct.
Who was that?
I know Detective Crawford did. There may have been one other, I believe. sergeant at the time, now Lieutenant Embry, I believe he also read over it. So I know for sure it was read over at least once, if not twice.
Your Honor, I'm not quite sure how to accomplish this through WebEx. I have a copy of the affidavit for search warrant. I guess I'll have to pull out will that show on WebEx? Mr. Seach, you see the judge holding up an affidavit for search warrant. Is this the search warrant that you drafted in this case?
Sir,
It's hard to show. Anyway. So
I'll stipulate that it is the search warrant, Judge. I'm sorry, the affidavit for the search warrant.
Given that stipulation, defense moves to enter this as exhibit number 9. 8, I'm sorry. May I first report? So, Mr. Seach, in the affidavit for search warrant, there are five reasons that you said that a search warrant is necessary. In one of those messages, it talks about Katrina Pace, Jasmine Pace's mother, having a message from her daughter, and you said this location, I'm quoting it verbatim, this shared location was 110 Tremont Street. How did you confirm that, if you did?
yes, sir. So I was shown a screenshot by of the location that was shared by Jasmine Pace. That location was shown in GPS coordinates. Just due to knowledge of the area that I had, I did know that location to be the lost at Tremont, which is 110 Tremont Street.
You didn't say that you viewed the phone in your affidavit, though. Did you specifically not include that in here, or was that just an omission?
It must have been an omission. There would be no reason for me to, want or need to omit that purposely.
But you said you viewed the phone, and the phone certainly didn't have the address 110 Tremont Street, did it?
No, sir. It had the GPS coordinates and a marked location showing the bills at Tremont, the loss at Tremont, which I know to be 110 Tremont Street.
Why didn't you just say the text message contained geographic coordinates?
I honestly, I don't have a reason. I saw it, knew the location and what it was, and that's just how I wrote it in my search warrant.
After you drafted this search warrant, I see that it's signed by Magistrate Powers. Is that correct?
From my recollection, that is correct, yes, sir.
Did you take it before any other judge or magistrate before going to Magistrate Powers?
I did not, no, sir.
Okay. Do you know if any other law enforcement officer did?
No, I was the one who wrote it, so no one else would have taken it from one that I would be aware of.
Did Magistrate Powers ever require you to rewrite this affidavit for search warrant or the search warrant?
Yes, sir.
In your affidavit for search warrant, first, you said you were at the interview with Katrina Pace and a few others.
That's correct.
Okay. And Ben McGowan was there too?
That's correct, yes, sir.
And then during that discussion, is it then that you learned that officers with the Chattanooga Police Department Officer Braisted and Officer Creighton had gone into the apartment?
I was not aware any Chattanooga police officers had entered the apartment.
So you weren't, could it be possible that you weren't in the interview room at the time that that was stated?
That's correct.
Okay.
I was not the entirety of the interview.
So when you wrote this the affidavit for search warrant, you were unaware of that fact?
I was not aware of that fact until you just told me, sir.
You didn't, so you did not include the fact that officers went into the apartment after Katrina Pace did because you didn't know it?
That's correct. I was completely unaware that anyone had gone into the apartment as far as Chattanooga police officers.
Were you in the interview room when Katrina Pace said that she went into the apartment?
Yes, I believe so.
Do you know how many times she went into the apartment?
To my knowledge, it was just once.
How did she say that she got into the apartment?
I believe she said it was an unsecured door when she went to the apartment.
And just to make sure, so this is an apartment inside a building. So when you say unsecured door, do you mean the door that leads to the outside or the interior apartment door?
From my understanding, it was the interior apartment door, specifically.
Okay. She never told you that someone opened it with a credit card?
No, sir.
Okay.
If so, that would have been in my search warrant.
So you put all the facts that you knew into the search warrant?
That's correct.
Or it was explained to you, rather?
Yeah, yes, sir. I'll make sure both explained and firsthand hearing.
When you drafted the search warrant, the purpose of the search warrant isn't to look for Jasmine Pace within the apartment. There's no belief that Jasmine Pace is in Jason Chen's apartment, correct?
That's correct.
So based on the affidavit for search warrant, you believe that there was probable cause relating to the location of Jasmine Pace, correct?
That's correct. Yes.
And that would be in the apartment?
Yes, sir.
Were you a part of the process in conducting the search warrant?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Or you were?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, the parties would like to agree and to save Mr. Seach the time to the stipulation of the entry of the search warrant. It is exhibit number 9, and the return is 10. Mr. Seach, thank you for your patience.
Yes, sir.
Did you, was it your understanding that Katrina Pace took things from the apartment when she was in there?
That's correct, sir, and I believe that was reflected in the affidavit for the search warrant.
Correct. And you went to, was it you that went to go pick up those things from Katrina Pace's residence?
Not that I recall, sir.
Obviously, the materials that Katrina Pace took from the apartment and took home with her, you weren't looking for those materials within Jason Chen's apartment, right? So the search warrant couldn't have been to recover the ID cards, correct? Because she had already taken those?
If there had been any others, I mean, we would have wanted to take those. I believe at the time, from my recollection, we weren't sure what all had actually been taken and what had not. Again, that's my recollection, not having the full case file in front of me.
Prior to the execution of the search warrant, did you or any other law enforcement observe, monitor, surveil Jason Chen's apartment?
I believe, I may be incorrect, I believe once we started writing the search warrant, we did have patrol go sit on the residence, which is a normal procedure that we go through just to make sure, once we become involved in writing a search warrant for residents that no one then we go in or out of the residence to move, destroy, hide, anything like that, evidence that we may be looking for.
Sure. So just so the court has a timeline, do you remember or recall the time that the Katrina Pace and her family met with you at on Amicola?
I don't remember the specific time, no, sir. I do know it was in the evening because I had driven to and from North Carolina that day, which is usually about a 7-hour drive. So, I mean, it would have been after like 5 o'clock at least, sir.
Okay. And you believe that sometime after that interview, and do you remember what time you executed the search warrant?
Offhand, no, I don't, sir.
But after you met with the family, you believe that there was a patrol officer that went and sat on the apartment?
That's correct. That would be the normal procedure that we would adhere to.
You don't have to recall the name of that officer, would you?
No, sir.
Just one moment, Your Honor. Thank you, Mr. Seach. I have no further questions. I'll pass the witness.
Investigator Seach, you testified to facts relating to the location of Jason Chen's apartment. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And do you recall in your affidavit, do you recall noting that the victim had shared her location with her mother at a certain time on a certain day?
That's correct, ma'am.
And so even though you don't have it in front of you, if I told you that the search warrant said on 11/27/2022 at approximately 0655 hours, patrol officers responded to 110 Tremont Street, apartment 210. Ms. Pace stated that on 11/23/2022 at approximately 0218 hours, the victim shared her location with her. This shared location was 110 Tremont Street. Does that sound like something that was in your affidavit?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'm going to attempt to show you two photos that are already in evidence as Exhibit 2 and Exhibit 3. We will start with Exhibit 3.
appears to be a screenshot of a location, or sorry, a photograph of a location on the phone, whether that be a screenshot or not. I can't tell.
Given the way that Judge Patterson was holding that, could you see the coordinates on the bottom?
I could not know, ma'am.
Okay, could you try to show the coordinates?
Yes, I can now see the third coordinates.
Okay, do you recall this being the photo or a similar photo of what you saw on the day that you were drafting this search warrant in order to ascertain that the location was 110 Tremont Street?
From my recollection, and I may be wrong, I apologize, the picture's pretty blurry. But from my recollection, I saw the map screenshot that showed the actual location on the building.
Okay, great. I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 2.
So, and again, it is very blurry, but that does appear to be more of what I was shown.
Okay, and does this photo and or what's portrayed in the photo, does this look familiar to you?
From what I was able to ascertain through the not super clear video, it does appear to be the loss at Tremont, 110 Tremont Street.
Okay, Judge, if you'd allow, can we see if it, from the DA iPad, it can be any more clear?
Absolutely.
Thank you. That's the Exhibit 2.
Okay, yes, that is what I recall being shown.
Okay, and how long did you live in Chattanooga?
I moved to Chattanooga in August of 2016 and lived there until August, September-ish of 2023.
Okay, and while you were living in Chattanooga, did you ever become familiar or have any opportunity to be in the North Shore area?
That's correct. Approximately 6 to 8 months prior, I happened to have been dating someone who lives in that area. We occasionally just walked through the neighborhood, which is actually, that's how I randomly became familiar that was the location of Lost at Tremont.
Okay, and so if the map that was just shown to you or the photo that was just shown to you has a street that says Tremont Street and a street that says Fraser Avenue with a pin drop on a building, you were aware based on your knowledge and experience that that was the lofts at Tremont, correct?
That's correct, yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do you recall being shown these photos before you drafted the affidavit?
I honestly can't recall if there were photos or if I was actually shown on Ms. Pace's phone.
Okay, I'm sorry. Let me clarify. Do you recall whether it was in photos like this or on Ms. Pace's or Ms. Bean's phone, seeing these two things?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. These two things meaning the locations in Exhibit 2 and Exhibit 3 to this hearing, for the record. Investigator Si, why, if you can answer this, why would homicide have gotten involved in what was a missing persons case?
So the information that we had at the time, leading up to me sitting down to write the search warrant, while writing the search warrant, well, on the surface appeared to just be a missing person case. It appeared, based on our training and experience, for myself all the way up to our supervisors, that we were looking at what appeared to be either a homicide or a kidnapping.
So that would be when you would get involved, as if facts were there that could lead one to believe there was some type of foul play.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and would you agree that when drafting an affidavit and a search warrant, you are only able to use the facts that you have at that time?
Yes, ma'am.
And would you agree that often, in a case similar to this one, there is there's a need for the search warrant to be drafted, issued, and executed in an expeditious manner?
That's correct. Especially in cases like this, time is of the essence. Given the situation, longer things take. Especially if it had been a kidnapping. Time's of the essence, and the quicker you move, the quicker you can get to your end state.
Going back to the GPS coordinates, have you before in a search warrant affidavit, have you included GPS coordinates of a location? And if so, in what situation would that be in?
I do not remember using or recall using GPS coordinates in any of my search warrants. I'm not saying I never did, but I don't recall. I was aware of a couple search warrants that were written using GPS coordinates. Specifically one for another case that involved a tent in a field being used as a crime scene. So the GPS coordinates were used for the specificity of the tent within, I believe it was a homeless encampment.
Because a tent doesn't have an actual address, correct?
That is correct, ma'am.
But when GPS coordinates are the same, point a person, an investigator, to a physical location that cannot be moved, it is attached to an address, correct?
That's correct. Whether latitude, longitude, MGRS, any other location data, it's still all going to go to the same place, regardless of the format.
And in this case, the GPS coordinates that you can see on Miss Pace's phone from Exhibit 2 and 3 that I just showed you, those coordinates are for 110 Tremont Street. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes, ma'am.
Nothing further, Judge.
Mr. Siege, you only put facts in your affidavit for search warrant, only the facts that you knew at the time, correct?
That's correct, sir, yes.
You also drafted the search warrant in this case too, correct?
That's correct. That's the normal that we would do affidavit search for return all of them.
Correct. In subsection 4 of your affidavit, you said personal effects of the victim, including ID card, a small travel bag, credit cards, and documents, including bank records. Did you know that to mean the Jasmine Pace's bank records or Jason Chen's bank records?
I honestly do not recall. I believe that they would have been Miss Jasmine Pace's, but I honestly can't say for sure. I just don't recall.
Number 5, at this time, the victim's whereabouts are unknown, and the last place she is presumed to have been is 110 Tremont Street, apartment 210. Is that based purely on the text message?
The building location is based on the text message. The apartment number was given to us by the victim's mother.
Okay. Did you or any other law enforcement ever attempt to contact Jasmine Pace?
I did not. I can't speak to what anyone else did regarding that.
At the time you executed, or I'm sorry, at the time you had the search warrant issued, had Jasmine Pace been declared a missing person?
I believe so, yes, sir.
Okay. You didn't, and did you declare, and how does one declare someone a missing person? How does law enforcement do that?
I'm not sure if it would be so much as law enforcement declaring someone is missing. Someone can be put into NCIC as a missing person. So when they're ran, I believe that may be what you're referring to. Is that correct?
So I don't know this. When I hear is that someone's declared a missing person, I think there's some type of list that they go on that's public knowledge that, hey, we're looking for this person. They put out Amber Alerts or things like that. Was that done as far as you know?
There was no Amber Alert. To my knowledge, she had been placed into NCIC as a missing person at that time.
What did you make any efforts to locate Jasmine Pace prior to execute or issuing the search warrant?
I did not, however, it was my understanding at the time that law enforcement as well as her family had made efforts to locate her.
How did you know Jason Chen even owned this apartment or lived in this apartment?
From the information that was presented to us.
From whom?
Jasmine Pace's mother.
Did you do anything to confirm that this was actually Jason Chen's apartment?
That I don't recall, sir.
So you're not even sure that Jason Chen lived in the apartment other than based on Katrina Pace's statement that he did?
At the time, we were more concerned with the fact that her belongings had been found in that apartment.
I understand. I understand that, Mr. Seach. What I want to know is how did you know that apartment belonged to Jason Chen?
From the information that we had, he was the one who was, habitating that apartment, whether or not he was, specifically on the lease.
I'm not asking about that.
No.
I'm asking for sources that you inquired on. So far you've said Katrina Pace. I just want to make sure there's nothing else. How do you know that Jason Chen lived there other than what Katrina Pace told you?
Again, I can't specifically recall what I would have done. I was not the only detective working on it. It would not be outlandish for myself or another detective to have, looked into the history of Mr. Chen to see his residences. I just don't specifically recall myself doing that. Oftentimes in cases like this, when we're writing these search warrants, we have multiple people looking at different bits of information, just because of the sheer time it would take for one person to do it, as well as being able to adequately write a search warrant in a timely manner.
And then in your affidavit for search warrant, you wanted the magistrate to let you have any evidence deemed relevant to the aforementioned missing person case, right? That's something that you asked for. And you wanted anything that could be used to conceal the whereabouts of the victim. Is that right?
That's correct, sir.
Had you known the officers had gone into the apartment, would you have included that in the affidavit?
That's correct, yes, sir.
Thank you. No further questions.
Nothing further, Judge.
Thank you, Mr. Seach.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Your Honor. I'm happy to dismiss. Yes, sir. All right, thank you, Your Honor. Have a good day.
Any other witnesses via WebEx today?
No.
Will you decide need to present her for any future witnesses?
I'll have some pictures, Your Honor.
Call next witness.
Next call is Michelle Johnson.
I swear from the testimony that you do the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Good morning. Can you please state your name?
Michelle Johnson?
And Ms. Johnson, is it Investigator Johnson?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Investigator Johnson, what is your position?
Crime scene investigator with Chen Police Department.
And what does a crime scene investigator do?
We respond to calls, document, collect evidence, process evidence. We document the scene through photography, video, scans, written notes, and drawings.
Going back to November the 27th, 2022, did you have the opportunity to help with the execution of a search warrant at 110 Tremont Street?
Yes, sir.
Tell me, so before you arrived on that scene, how did you get information that you needed to go there?
I was requested by Detective Crawford, and requested to respond to that location.
And when you arrived at that location, who, if anyone, was there? That either with law enforcement or something related to the search?
Of course, there was a lot of patrol officers there. I believe Detective Crawford was there, and Sergeant Henry was there.
And did you make your way up to the apartment?
Yes.
Prior to you going into the apartment, had anyone else been into the apartment that you know of?
I would not know.
Would anyone be, should law enforcement go into a place where a search warrant's going to be executed prior to you going in there?
I'm not sure what their protocol is as far as executing the search warrant. We're usually notified once it's been executed and once the area has been cleared or safe, and safe.
And so when you went there, you're not aware of any law enforcement officer having gone in prior to you going in there?
Correct.
Okay. And take us through, what did you do when you got there?
We went through the walkthrough the apartment.
And what is a walkthrough? What do you do?
It's just an initial walkthrough of the scene or the apartment, just to get familiar with the layout of the apartment. And we also look for anything in plain sight while we're walking through and get a game plan on how we may process that scene.
Do you document the scene with pictures and videos?
Correct, yes.
And do you do that prior to touching objects or moving anything?
Correct.
So explain to me that part of it. So before you process the scene, you said you take pictures and video?
Correct.
Why do you do that?
I mean, that's part of the processing the scene, is to document the scene as we find it when we arrive.
Why is that?
Crime scene investigators.
Is that an important thing to do?
I mean, from my job, yes. I mean, I'm documenting the scene how it is before I disturb the scene.
And why is that important?
Just because if there's any changes made, well, that I did during the processing, then they can be documented. So if we're on a search warrant, we'll document the scene prior to touching anything, and we'll document it before we leave, show how we left the scene.
And did you take pictures in this case?
Yes.
Okay. And you did that to document the scene?
So,
And you did that to memorialize what the scene looked like before law enforcement processed it, correct?
I documented the scene, how it was when I arrived on scene.
Understood. May I put you on?
Hey, Josh. I object to the body cam.
I'm not Ma'am, I'm going to show you a few pictures, and if you keep them in order. If you can identify these pictures. Are those pictures that you took processing the scene?
Correct.
Your Honor, if I have about, I think, 8 pictures.
That way the witness will know what she's referring to, the record will reflect that, and you have time to mark those once they're designated. Then you can resume your examination. Any objection to any of these photos?
So long as they're the photos that crime scene took upon the execution of the search warrant, no. If there are other photos, then I'd have to see them, Judge.
I'm not introduced, I have body cam photos, I'm not introduced to those.
So the photos you're about to present to this witness are photos taken by CPD.
By this witness, yeah.
No objection.
I'm gonna let Abby mark those, then you can start using your recommendation. Do you need the overhead, Mr. Watson?
Yes, sure.
I was looking for Felix. Mike, do you know how to?
Yes.
Judge, you're welcome to speak to me.
Investigator Johnson, will you look through these pictures and tell me, are those pictures that you took on that day? And those accurately depict the pictures that you took? May I approach, Your Honor? I'm showing you what's been marked as exhibit number 11, if you look behind you. Thank you. Do you see any paper towels on the futon? Exhibit number 16. Can you see that green notebook on the bed?
Yes.
And can you see what appears right here? What does that look like to you? Right here in the corner where my finger is pointing, right there in the corner.
So the knife?
Knife. I'm going to show you exhibit number 18. You can see that same knife here more clearly.
Yes.
Were those there when you came into the apartment?
Yes.
Did any law enforcement come in after you?
Right. Okay, so once I did my initial walkthrough, the person from the control officers outside, their apartment not allowed anyone else in. And then they proceeded downstairs to get equipment and and also we will research some dumpsters and stuff downstairs.
Yes. One moment, Your Honor.
Thank you, Investigator Johnson. I'll pass the witness.
Oh, Investigator Johnson, I've got just a couple questions for you. Do you do any type of forensic examination of cell phones at the police department? It's not your job to go through cell phone records collected via subpoenas or search warrants to look at locations of individuals. Is that correct? Okay. So, you testified about items in those photos appearing in the photos the way they appeared when you were there, correct? But you don't know who was there, let's say 2 hours before the search warrant was executed, do you? And because you don't do the forensic examinations of cell phone data, you don't know if the defendant was there a couple hours prior to your arrival. Is that correct? Nothing further, Judge.
You have no idea who was in that apartment before you, I guess, right? Could have been the victim's family for all you know. Could have been other law enforcement officers that you don't know, right? Could have been a private investigator, right? Do you have any proof that those people weren't there? Thank you, ma'am.
Nothing further, Judge.
Thank you. What's the point?
Next call is Investigator Crawford.
I swear from the testimony about the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Good morning, Investigator Crawford. It's good to see you again.
Good morning.
So you've been allowed to sit in this room and hear every piece of testimony from the very beginning, correct?
That's correct.
And you've listened attentively?
Yes.
Okay. And so I want to talk to you about your involvement with this case. Can you please state your full name?
It's Zach Crawford.
And what is your position?
I'm a homicide detective in the Buffington Police Department.
I do cross, so I do not usually have to set this up. And how long have you been with the Chattanooga Police Department?
Since 2013.
And in that time, had you had any opportunity to work on any homicide cases
Many
and missing persons cases?
missing person cases that went into homicide cases.
But I guess you had never worked a missing person case that didn't lead into a homicide case then?
As a patrol officer, I worked many missing persons cases.
Okay. And then you've had the opportunity to execute a search warrant before?
Yes, that's true.
And so coming to this case involving Jason Chen, how did you come into the fold? How did you become part of the investigation?
Originally, when I became part of the investigation, I was notified about the incident by my supervisor, Sergeant Emery. It was approximately around 1,800 hours on the 27th, November 27th and 22. I was notified that there were suspicious circumstances surrounding the disappearance of Jasmine Pace. So just going after learning these things and discussing with my supervisor, we ultimately decided that we were going to go to the police service center where we'd have the ability to talk with missing persons investigator Tomlin and the victim's family.
And then you conducted a recorded interview with Katrina Pace and others.
That's correct.
Who was all there?
From the law enforcement side, at first, are you talking about present in the room or in general who's the police service?
Present in the room.
In the room, getting the interview, law enforcement personnel that were present, Sergeant Emery, Detective Si at the time, and myself.
Well, you just heard Detective Seach testify on WebEx. Was he not in the room the entire time?
He was in there at the beginning of the interview. He was into a good portion of the interview. But then I requested for him to start drafting an affidavit for a search warrant for Jason Chen's apartment, and also to have patrol officers respond to that location to secure it until we were having the ability to potentially seek a search warrant.
Let me go ahead and get into that. So you intended to secure the apartment on 110 Tremont Street.
That's correct.
And
surveillance.
How did you how did you surveil it first?
I did not personally surveil it.
How did law enforcement surveil it?
Typically, the process for this, in this case, we notified the supervisor of that specific area, told them the circumstances of the case that we were working at the time. We gave them the physical description of Mr. Chen and of Jasmine Pace. And the location we were looking at, we requested they had at least one or two patrol officers respond in that area for the ability to secure and surveil the property. And they had two or more patrol officers respond that same to potentially secure.
Who are the patrol officers?
Off the top of my head, I do not recall.
But that's something that you could go back and find out. And when they were on surveilling it and making sure that it was secure, do you know if they stayed in their patrol car in the parking lot or if they actually went into the building?
At first, I know that they were outside in the parking lot area and across the street near the Regions Bank location, due to not having access to the interior part of the department or the apartments, until we were able to get in touch with a courtesy officer, Officer Clemens, who then provided key code and had a key ready for the door on search warrant.
So law enforcement couldn't get in to the apartment building, but Katrina Pace and her family were able to get in earlier without any.
Objection, Judge, is leading,
It's
and it's speculative and argumentative.
under Rule 104, Tennessee Rules of Evidence, when the defendant has to call an obviously hostile witness, and this is the lead investigator for the state, I'm allowed to enter into leading questions.
In that leading questions, just need to break it down. Objection. Use a competent question.
Your Honor, I would also just like to clarify, this is not a hostile witness. You're not hostile just because you are the investigator in a case. You're hostile once you start acting hostile on the stand, and that's important because throughout the rest of this questioning, the state would object to any leading based on the fact that this witness is not hostile at all.
I think it's just developed testimony. With this particular witness, Mr. Wise can certainly get as close to leading as he needs to get the information out. Just need to break the question down, Mr. Wise, okay? So objections sustained as the basis of this compound question. Obviously can't lead as it was for cross-examination. You understand, Mr. Wise?
Yes, Your Honor. Okay. So let's go and talk about how the apartment was secured. The police officers, law enforcement officers that were securing the apartment had an issue of getting into the apartment building itself.
At their initial response.
But they were able to get in?
Correct.
At what time?
I'm not exactly sure. I was.
And during the time that they were there, did anyone enter into the apartment as far as you know? Apartment 110, Jason Chen's apartment.
Apartment 210.
I'm sorry, apartment 210 at 110 Tremont Street. Did anyone enter into that apartment that you know?
I would not. At the time, that officer was there.
Correct.
Patrol officers did not make entry to that apartment.
And I'm not suggesting as such.
That's what I'm saying. It's the only knowledge that I have at the time. The patrol officers didn't make it, and they had the outside security at that time.
And had they seen Jason Chen go into the apartment, they would have told you that, right?
Correct.
And if they had seen Katrina Pace or any other member or family or friends or investigator, they would have told you that as well.
Correct.
Okay. You said that you did an interview with Katrina Pace and others there. I'm not sure if you mentioned all the people that were actually there yet.
Didn't have the chance to.
Go ahead, please.
I spoke to the 3 law enforcement officers that were in the room. Also in the room were the victim's family, to include Katrina Pace, Travis Pace, and Katrina's husband, Scott. And then Attorney McGowan.
And it's from this conversation that facts were learned that were used in the affidavit to obtain the search warrant, correct?
Correct.
Miss Pace told you that she went into the apartment.
Correct.
And that she, how did she say that she got into the apartment?
At first,
Yes.
she said that the door was unsecured, and she made it.
And it wasn't until we had hearings in this matter that we learned that the door was actually secured. Is that right?
Correct.
Someone used a credit card to get into that door, correct?
I don't know how they got into the there was different testimony to which how they got in.
Wasn't that Katrina Pace's testimony?
Correct.
So it's then, was it at that hearing that you learned that Katrina Pace had lied to you at that interview?
No,
You had known that before?
we found it out a few days prior.
A few days prior to?
Her testimony.
Oh, okay, I misunderstood. So she only admitted the truth to you prior to us having a hearing here.
About how she got into the apartment.
Okay. And during that conversation, she also told law enforcement that 2 officers had gone into the apartment and searched too, correct?
She said 2 officers did make entry into the apartment.
And conducted a search. Or, I'm sorry, let me rephrase. They had gone in there to look for Jasmine Pace.
She said they made entry into the apartment.
Okay.
Is how she stated.
Prior, so I know that you did not obtain the search warrant, but did you or any other law enforcement, including Investigator Si at the time, go and speak to those officers?
They were off duty at the time. I attempted to verify that information. Typically, a way to do it easily accessible is to pull their body camera footage. At that time, they had not docked their body cameras, meaning that they put them for upload. So I was unable to view it. The only knowledge that I had that something like that existed that I was able to verify was Officer Justice's patrol report that he had documented over the timeline. But we did attempt to locate and talk to those officers, but were unsuccessful.
And so you are unaware that the officers had a body camera recording at the time that they entered into the apartment, correct?
I would assume they had their body cameras activated.
Sure, but you hadn't seen it.
Correct.
Have you since viewed it?
Yes.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Your Honor, can I go, I intend to introduce these as exhibits. Should I go ahead and do it the same way we did the other ones?
They have been said.
Not for the purposes of this hearing, Judge, no.
Can you go through these and tell me, are these the body camera, are these stills from the body camera video that we watched in court at our last hearing? Or at the first hearing, rather?
Can I take the Franklin's off?
Yes, yes, sir.
You want me
If-
to put them on the back or just take them off?
Now that they're exhibits, you can take them off.
I would say there are depictions of body camera footage from the time frame officers went in, but I'm unaware of whose body camera it is.
That could be identified by the numbers in the upper right-hand corner, can't it?
The body camera number, that's something I'm not familiar with.
Is that what the video depicted of Jason's Chen's Officer Brace or Officer Crane went through it?
That's correct.
So after meeting with the family, did you help in the process of drafting the search warrant with Investigator Si?
I did provide information to Detective Si.
Okay. And did you provide information to him that he wouldn't have heard during the interview?
That's correct.
Okay. So the knowledge that Investigator Si may have put into that report may have come from you independently without him having heard it during the interview.
Yeah, it's a possibility, that's correct.
Do you know if this search warrant was taken before any other judge or magistrate?
Do I know if it was taken to a magistrate?
To any other judge or magistrate other than Magistrate Powers?
Not to my knowledge.
So after Magistrate Powers issued the search warrant, tell me what you did.
What do I do?
After Magistrate Powers issued the search warrant for this case, what did Investigator Crawford do?
Well, after I was first notified by Detective Si that a search warrant was signed off by Magistrate Powers. At that point, I was doing a few other things in the office. I subsequently responded to one entry.
And when you arrived, who was there?
Multiple patrol officers, and later Detective Si arrived.
Prior, did you see Investigator Johnson there?
Yes.
Had Investigator Johnson already gone and taken pictures? So she began processing the scene when she got there. You heard her testify to that, right? When she began processing the scene, she took pictures. You heard that, right?
Correct.
When prior to her taking these pictures, do you know if you or any other law enforcement officers entered into the apartment?
Yes.
Why?
Why?
Yes.
Investigator Johnson is a civilian employee at the police department. She is not armed. Part of our police protocol, part of the search warrant being executed, especially on violent crime, is to secure that residence. Several patrol officers, to include Detective Si, interviewed deemed it safe, which is practiced in every search warrant they execute. So they did enter the apartment to make sure that no persons were in there that were going to commit harm while the execution of the search warrant was happening.
That confuses me. Let me explain why. Katrina Pace and her family, multiple people had already been through that apartment, correct?
Correct.
No one was in there when they went in there.
Correct.
And you knew that.
So they're just
Correct. And you knew that, though.
correct.
And then you also knew that two Chattanooga police officers had entered into the apartment.
I believe they did based on the patrol report that I read.
And you have had that apartment secure. What time did the search warrant get executed?
At 23:40 hours.
So, and when did you order patrol officers to secure the apartment?
Around 8 p.m.
So for about 3.5 to 4 hours, that apartment was secured.
To our knowledge, we didn't observe anyone enter the apartment. We had no knowledge of anyone was inside the apartment at that time.
And when you got to the apartment, you went in before Investigator Johnson.
Correct.
And before, and you went in, Investigator Si went in, who else went in?
Several patrol officers went in, basically gave me security.
And what did you do while you were in there?
What did we do in there prior to the?
And prior to Investigator Johnson taking the pictures that we've introduced today, what did you, Investigator Si, and any other law enforcement do while you were in there?
Well, I can tell you the first thing I did, when the execution search warrant was happening, when I arrived there, actually all patrol officers then went inside of the building to then deem it safe. Because all patrol officers went inside, due to the exterior balcony, I actually remained outside to make sure no one could have left that apartment. Once I was notified via radio that it was secure, I then left outside and went into the apartment. As soon as I got there, all patrol officers were outside there. The two individuals that were at the front threshold of the door was Detective Si and Detective Joel Gunn. He was there as well. They were approximately 5 feet within the door. As soon as I walked into the door to see the apartment layout, because at that time I didn't really have knowledge of what we were working with at that time, because normally I'm the one that directs, as a lead investigator, the processing and the walk through the crime scene location. As soon as looking through the front door, I typically will use my flashlight, whether it's day or night, to look in certain surroundings to make sure certain evidence can't be messed with or anything like that, as long as my first knowledge of it. In the first 10 seconds of entering there, I did see something that appeared to be blood on the floor area, and I ultimately asked the other two detectives to remove themselves from the apartment. I then looked in the apartment to see what else we were working with prior to Michelle Johnson being there. I did not touch or disturb any items inside that apartment.
You didn't move anything?
No.
May I approach? May we have a defendant's laptop, please?
Investigator, if you'll look behind you.
you should see exhibit number 11 on the right and exhibit 22 on the left.
Yes, sir.
I've pointed some things out as a demonstrative. Do you see in the body cam video on the left, those brawny paper towels?
That's correct.
Those were on there when the officers came through with their body cam, correct?
It appears so.
They're not there when Investigator Johnson comes and takes pictures.
That is incorrect.
That's incorrect?
You can see them in the photograph.
They are on the futon?
Do you mind if I approach?
Sure, by all means.
There is a black Nike bag that is on the futon right now. You can actually see one corner of a paper roll. You can see another paper roll here with the green logo for the Bronx. Maybe that's there as well.
You're welcome to stay standing up.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You got the laser.
Here you're seeing, these are pictures 12 and 23, so that's a different angle. Chris, so someone's moved this bag on top of the paper towels,
I would assume so, yes.
and you see the items on the table have moved?
Correct. You're talking about these items?
Yes, sir.
Yes, it appears that.
And the body cam video, all the cabinets are closed, right?
It appears so in these pictures.
And then in the pictures that Investigator Johnson took, they're all open.
That's correct.
You didn't do that, did you?
No, sir.
And you don't think any other law enforcement officer did it either, did you? Or do you?
No, I do not believe that they opened the cabinets.
So I'm showing you it's been marked as exhibit 24 and 13. You see items on the desk have changed, the chair has moved. Do you see all those?
Correct. I can see via the picture the chair has moved positions, and it appears that the items on the desk are different. I can't verify this.
I'm showing you it's been marked exhibits 14 on the right and exhibit 25 on the left. Different items on the floor, the curtains have been changed, a door has been closed. You see all that?
Correct. Now, I can testify that the curtains may have been moved when the patrol officers were securing the apartment. They did touch the curtains to make sure that there wasn't an exterior, something else there.
What else did the patrol officers touch that you know about?
To my knowledge, nothing else. I do know they do that to check the door to make sure that it's not an exterior door that could lead out. But to my knowledge, they wouldn't have touched any of that.
Here's the next picture, 15, exhibit 15 and 26. You see where items have been moved, repositioned. You see all that?
That's correct.
Now you see exhibits 27 and 16. The pillow's been moved from the bed. It's in a different place now. Right?
Yes, sir.
And now you can see that edge of that knife, can't you?
You can see what appears to be the chief of it, yes.
And you see that green folder there?
On this picture, yes, sir.
You don't see it in the body cam picture, do you?
No, sir.
I'm showing you it's been marked as exhibit 17 and 28. In the body cam picture, there is a pillow over on that side of the bed. But in the Investigator Johnson's, now you can see that knife has clearly been laid there.
Well, based on this picture, I don't think you could make a complete answer to say that that's been placed there. The only thing I can say is that that location would have been covered by the pillow prior. Unknown would have been under the pillow, so I don't know about the placement of the knife other than the pillow.
We're still using Exhibit 28, but now that it's Exhibit 28 and Exhibit 18. Items on the bed have been moved, the drawers have been opened, there's now new items on the floor. You recognize all that?
In this picture, I can see the movement of the pillow and the notebook that's moving around, and maybe this object here.
And then still Exhibit 28, and here is Exhibit 19 next to it. You can see some of those things more. In fact, things are missing.
It does appear different.
You can Law enforcement didn't move any of that.
Not to my knowledge, no.
Law enforcement would know better than to compromise the scene.
Correct.
You didn't remove those paper towels, correct?
No.
You didn't place the knife there.
No.
You didn't open the cabinets.
No.
You didn't put that green folder on there.
No.
During the course of your interview with the Pace family, was it ever explained with law enforcement asking, what is the status of a private citizen that conducts a search? Do you remember that?
What is the status of the private citizen conducting a search?
Right, is whether or not that can be used for probable cause or not. Do you remember that conversation?
I did have conversations about the evening, yes.
And you had those with Ben McGowan?
We had a conversation in the hallway, I think, about what the incident was, and we did have a recorded conversation with Ms. McGowan, yes, with others present.
And it was an unknown party, but now after hearing Investigator Si, I heard Investigator Si, what is the status of Katrina Pace's statements? And he explained it to law enforcement, didn't he?
I'm not sure of the voice you're referring to at this point.
I'm going to play a recording for you.
Not for the purposes of this hearing, Judge.
Is there sound, Your Honor?
Took off your laptop, it's back on the laptop.
Now, listen here, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So do you know what the severity standard is? When we start looking at drawers, outside of the body, outside of the scope of per person.
Right, in terms of if they're in flow claims. Okay. So my understanding, and you should run this through Cody's office. My understanding is that if they have obtained evidence unlawfully, that's still evidence that is useful for probable cause. It should be disclosed for procedure. and that that does not interfere, you know, it's going to be a field day for his lawyer if there is ever a case. But obviously, the lawyer should right now we're getting fouled. But at the end of the day, you know, there is a grounds to receive that, just as if you get it, inmate information that's been unlawfully obtained, it can still become part of the investigation, and there could be derivative use from that. Does that address your question?
Because I know that y'all are good going in, doors open, I'm bringing my dog, you can check on stuff, it's like our day.
Right, because, right, so if they're doing a protective sweep, all they can do is look for where the person might be, okay, or if they see things in plain sight, right? You're not bound by the same standard, right? Now, you know, somebody can say, well, they shouldn't be going through all that stuff, that's privacy violation. As long as they weren't directing you to do that, as long as the police weren't involved in cultivating your illegal activity, if it was illegal activity, then they can still use that information to develop further leads.
That's bullshit here. I don't think, if I had to flip the script, drop the badge, just go on as a vetting, I would find it very hard. But I definitely would have went in. I definitely would have looked for non-overland songs, looked for Auburn anywhere I could. It's just, I don't know. I don't want something to happen.
Well, I think that's why she wanted to disclose.
And
it.
I appreciate that. I didn't have enough PC to get in. That's just the big time kicker that her ID and bank cards are inside. We were scared.
I am scared. I'm very scared.
And I keep saying, I don't think that you said wrong. I just want to get over the legal.
They said, you know, legally, this is a vetting, because we can't prove it's a crime. And I understand what they're saying. As a parent, we don't see it the way.
Well, it also often happens that it's in the course of a crime being committed, there's evidence of another crime that's discovered. That doesn't mean the police have to ignore that other evidence, right? I'm not saying a crime was committed, I'm saying it's good that you disclose that.
Can I ask?
So Investigator Crawford, do you remember that part of your interview?
I do remember.
It was there, at least that you understood, and you would think that Katrina Pace would understand that any search that they do can be the basis of probable cause for a search, right?
Yes, they found that information out after they heard it.
And then you heard Katrina Pace testify in this case, right?
Correct.
And she said she went into the Jason Chen's apartment 3 or 4 times.
Correct.
She didn't know if it was 3 or 4.
Correct.
She couldn't tell me when.
She couldn't tell you the exact times. I think she stated which day it was, but.
And there was a period of time that there were patrol officers outside Jason Chen's apartment after you had done this interview.
Correct.
And during the interview. You don't know if they were actually inside the apartment or when they got inside the apartment building itself or when they were just patrol outside.
Correct. I'm not exactly sure.
You don't know if Katrina Pace went into that apartment after her interview.
Yes.
You do know.
Yes.
You don't know if someone else went into that apartment after her interview.
After her interview was concluded, we already had the apartment secured, so yes.
Right, you said secured, but you don't know when actual officers went into the building.
I know that it was secured prior to the Pace family leaving the police service.
You just don't know how well secure.
Correct, at this point.
One moment, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
Investigator Crawford, in this investigation, prior to finding the body of Jasmine Pace, your first and foremost the first and foremost thing that you want to do is find her, correct?
Preservation of life is always first.
You're willing to tarnish an investigation to do that.
Specific investigations, if it means saving someone's life, that holds precedence over evidence.
And you're willing to forego jumping through hoops of a proper search warrant to, if that means.
Objection, Judge, argumentative and leading.
You would seek, or you would say that getting a search warrant for this type of thing is jumping through hoops, right?
I would say it's the legal means that we deem necessary to take to make sure that things can hold within the law.
And you're willing to forego jumping through those hoops if it means that it's a preservation for, if you can preserve a life.
Yes, I believe that agency in certain situations, there's, I believe, case law that supports due to agency requirements that certain things can be foregone for preservation of life.
And so you'd be willing to tarnish an entire investigation if that meant.
Would not be willing to tarnish investigation under 116.
One last one.
Investigator Crawford, if you'll listen to the statement and identify if this is you.
It's in these situations, it's a very, it all depends on circumstances. Depending on what information we can uncover in these next 2 hours, contact may be made extremely soon, it may not be until a day or so. And it all depends on what we believe is the best course of action. Preservation of life is first and foremost. You know, if we have to tarnish our entire investigation to save someone's life, that's what's going to happen. And if we have to say that the criminal investigation gets thrown out because we have to jump through hoops, and ultimately things happen where we basically don't pull the wall, but we skip through hoops instead of preservation of life is first and foremost.
That's my first and foremost.
Is
that you, Investigator Crawford?
It is.
I'll pass the witness at this time.
Let's pick up there. You're talking about tarnishing an investigation potentially by not going through the hoops that we normally have to go through in criminal justice, correct?
Correct.
But you went through the hoops here, right?
Correct.
Because Investigator Si drafted a search warrant, didn't he?
That's correct.
You helped him with that, didn't you?
That's correct.
Investigator Si drove his CPD vehicle to the jail to locate a magistrate, correct?
That's correct.
He presented the search warrant to a magistrate, correct?
Correct.
It was signed lawfully by a magistrate, is that correct?
Correct.
And then it was executed in the same way that you would execute any search warrant on any type of case coming from the Chattanooga Police Department, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. You or CPD officers, after you spoke with Katrina Pace, what you just heard, did anyone enter that apartment based on exigent circumstances?
Objection, speculation.
That falls within the, the police investigation as a whole. I think the officer knows the answer.
I think you would be able to say any law enforcement potentially, but any person.
I'm talking about law enforcement.
I assume that.
Yeah, did any law enforcement officer from the Chattanooga Police Department enter the apartment after you spoke with Katrina Pace at the service center? Did any law enforcement officer enter the apartment on the basis of exigent circumstances? They entered the apartment based on a validly executed search warrant, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. All right. So, to your knowledge, Jasmine's friends and family went into Mr. Chen's apartment in the early morning hours of the 27th. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. To your knowledge, they left shortly after, sometime around the time that patrol, Raisted, Creighton, and Justice left the apartment as well, correct?
Correct.
It is not until many hours later, that CPD asked for that apartment complex specifically apartment 210, to be secured while a search warrant was being issued. Is that correct? You said that it was around 8 p.m. on the 27th of November that around that time, you or someone else in investigations would have asked that patrol secure it while a search warrant's being sought. Okay. So we're talking whenever Jasmine's family leaves in the early morning hours to 8 p.m., that apartment is unsecured.
Correct.
Meaning no one's watching it, to your knowledge. Okay. You don't have any evidence that Katrina Pace went to that location again that day, do you? You don't have any evidence that a private investigator went to that area or to that apartment building that day before 8 p.m., do you? You do have evidence that someone involved in this case was in the exact area of that apartment building prior to it being secured at 8 p.m., don't you? And who was that person that was in that area before 8 p.m. on November 27th, 2022? And how do you know that?
Through the use of his cell phone.
Explain that, Investigator Crawford.
In the course of this investigation, we obtained a search warrant through T-Mobile or through the courts to subpoena to T-Mobile for his records. One of those records, they included time in advance data, which is location data for the cell phone. In this specific case, I mapped those records through the use of cellular mapping software. During the review of those records, it shows the potential location of Mr. Chen's cellular device. Specifically, as we're referring to, on November 27th to 22, in the morning hours of that day, his cellular device shows in the area of Nolensville, specifically in the area of his parents' residence. Around midday, after lunchtime, around 1 or 2, that cellular device is then tracked back to the Chattanooga area, specifically the North Shore area, within a pretty close diameter to the Lawson Tremont, typically 110 Tremont Street, between the hours of 6 and 7 p.m.
So the only proof that the state of Tennessee has, the only proof that we have that someone went back to that location before it was secured is the defendant, Jason Chen.
Correct.
And then do his cell phone records show him again leaving the city of Chattanooga?
Yes, that's correct.
To your knowledge, Jason Chen would have had access to his own apartment at that time, wouldn't he have?
That's correct.
Let's talk about the second search of 210, apartment 210 at 110 Tremont Street. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Okay. Explain to the court how, after a search warrant's executed, and particularly in this kind of case, there is a substantial amount of evidence located. Explain to the court how long the Chattanooga Police Department would have that property in their possession, meaning only CPD would have access to it, and then when it would be transferred back to a property owner.
In this specific case, when the execution of search warrant occurred at 110 Tremont Street, is a inside location. Essentially that residence was secured prior to the search warrant. During the execution of the search warrant and the processing of the crime scene location, it would be secured until the final execution of that search warrant, meaning the documentation, the collection, and processing of evidence from that scene. Once the documentation, collection of evidence, and all those things have happened, and we deemed that no further evidence or processing need to be done at that time, we would then relinquish that place back to the rightful owners for business.
Was that done in this case?
That's correct.
Who is the rightful owner of 110 Tremont Street?
At the time, the leasee would have been Jason Chen.
Uh-huh.
And obviously, because he's the leasee, that ultimately comes back to John Weiss, the owner of that property.
Okay, so we know it's Jason Chen's apartment that he is renting, and then who is John Weiss?
He is the owner of Weiss Properties, so he actually owns the physical building at that location.
Okay, that was a Weiss Properties location, you mean?
That's correct.
Did you begin communicating with Weiss Properties at some point?
I did speak with, in the coming days after that, I had multiple contacts with Weiss Properties or people affiliated with Weiss Properties.
Would you have contacted them to let them know that CPD was done with the crime scene and that the apartment was out of your hands at that point in time?
Correct, and that's due to sometimes, depending on the locking situation of those doors, we request that they potentially change the locks, or if it's key card access, we ask them to deactivate it, just to make sure that it's completely secure at the time. We did notify them that we were done with that residence, so that it was released back to the right one.
And then it was their decision what they do with it from there, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And do you know about the time that you would have released that Jason Chen's apartment back to either the lessee or to Weiss Properties?
It was within a few days after we processed it, after we did the search warrant.
Okay. And was Mr. Chen in custody at this time?
Correct.
Okay. And after, well, did you ever go back to 110 Tremont Street?
Multiple times.
And what was the first contact you had with Weiss Properties after you had let them know that CPD was done with the crime scene and they could have it back? What was the next contact you had?
The last contact was then around January, or I'm sorry, within around December 5th to December 7th. And then the next time I physically arrived back to that location for the purpose of that apartment would have been on January 5th, 2023.
What happened in January that led you to go back to that apartment?
I was notified by the property managers that Mr. Chen had relinquished his apartment, that surrenders the right apartment as due to an early termination agreement. And they advised me that due to that early termination agreement, they were going to begin the process of renovating it for the purposes of getting a new tenant into the apartment. I asked them prior to that if I could potentially have consent to further investigate the scene, which was then granted. They did provide consent to search that apartment because now it was in the sole owner of Weiss Properties. I did speak with the manager who allowed me access back to the apartment when I learned that they actually had a cleaning crew there at the time.
Did you ever, was it somebody from Weiss Properties that told you about a cleaning crew going in?
Correct.
What was that? What was that about?
Due to the nature of the incident that occurred in there, they had to change out multiple things to include boarding and such. They had sent a cleaning/renovation company there to specifically start work on the floors due to blood saturation. During that period of time, they discovered large amounts of blood recovered in that apartment, at which point, when they discovered the large amounts of blood, they stopped, they took photographs of it, they sent it to the property manager, who ultimately then provided that back to me as new information. So after that, that's when I requested for permission to further search and process that scene, which they granted, and I subsequently responded back that evening.
And when you did that, did you find anything that you believe was related to the death of Jasmine Pace?
That's correct.
And what was that?
Specifically, it was blood saturation in the carpet area of the master bedroom. There was more blood saturation under tiling in the bathroom. And also, there was one piece of furniture that was left with the apartment when it was surrendered, and that was the bed frame. And specifically, we can still see the headboard. I did notice at that point, based on the decluttering the room and the lighting room, that when we originally processed the crime scene location, that it appeared not to match the normal extent of that apartment prior to the crime being occurred.
Okay, so to be clear, why would you have found evidence on the second search that you were not able to find on the first search?
Specifically the bed, where it was placed in our initial search and initial processing of that scene, was in a different location. It was placed on the western wall. If you would be walking into the master bedroom, it was on your left-hand side, which against the western wall. Specifically where that bed was located, under there was the large saturation of blood in the carpet. It was cleaned on the top, but due to its saturation, it went through the bottom of the carpet. It also went through the subflooring onto the bottom portion, so it went through 3 layers of flooring essentially. but it was not seen to the naked eye due to a bed being there. And obviously the tile, we couldn't see under the tile. We could see that a small portion of blood showed on top of the tile. We did not have knowledge that the blood seeped in multiple directions under the tile.
What you collected on the January 5th search, did you send that evidence to the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation for testing?
Correct.
One moment, Judge. Nothing further, Judge.
Investigator Crawford, you talked about Jason Chen being back in the area on November the 28th, is it?
It would be the 27th.
27th. So on the November the 27th. And you said you got this through the timing advanced data?
Correct. It's one of the data points specifically with T-Mobile.
And is this GPS data? Is this general location data based on towers? Do you know how any of this works?
Yes, it's specifically each and every provider stores their records in different formats, has different names, and the way that they're mapped in different ways. And specifically this way with timing advanced data, to not too technical so the court can understand. Essentially, the timing advanced data provided by the provider essentially is each sector of each cell tower has 3 sectors. They're broken up in potentially 33.9, 33.3% quadrants, right? To make up 100 degrees. What they do is provide an azimuth from one specific sector, an azimuth in a direction, that ultimately then provides an azimuth in direction, and it provides how long, based on the signal strength of the phone. So it essentially would say at a 37th degree azimuth at 1.257 miles away, your device is located in this general area.
And so how accurate is it? Is it accurate within a meter, a mile, 10 miles? Do you know?
There's multiple factors in that, depending on the provider itself. They will store in those records low, medium, and high competency. And then also each device has an accuracy plus or minus 10.
So let's talk about this case specifically. You got this advanced timing timing advanced data from T-Mobile.
Correct.
And this is Jason Chen's cell phone information. You got this from his provider.
Correct.
Did you have a search warrant for that?
That's correct.
You did?
Correct.
And when did you obtain that search warrant?
On the 28th.
And that data that you got on the 28th had shown that Jason Chen had been there on the 27th?
I did not receive that data on the 28th. The search warrant was executed on the 28th. That data was not provided until 7 days later.
7 days later. Okay. So you ended up getting that data, correct?
Correct.
And based on that data, you're saying that you could tell Jason Chen came back to Chattanooga on November the 27th?
Correct.
Are you able to tell with accuracy how far he came to his apartment?
Based on the points and the high, medium, low accuracy confidence hits, you can say that he was within potentially 100 meters, potentially. I couldn't say any greater than that. It would be 100 meters.
So can you say that you have definitive proof that Jason Chen re-entered his apartment on that date?
No, I can say that he came back. I could have speculation based on other evidence that was collected.
I'm not asking you to speculate. I'm asking you, based on that cell phone data, do you know that Jason Chen re-entered his apartment on November the 27th?
No.
On January 5th, you had conducted a second search of Jason's apartment? Or of the apartment on 110?
210, because at that point it wasn't his apartment.
I understand your contention there. You didn't get a warrant for that?
Didn't legally need one.
You didn't get a warrant because you didn't think you needed one?
Had consent via the owners at that time.
Yeah, based on the landlord's representations, correct?
They showed documentation saying that that apartment was theirs at that point in time, based on their representation of that. Sole responsibility would then lie with them, whether if they were going to give me access or not. If they did provide access, then obviously it would have to go through the legal means of getting the search warrant.
Okay. But it was based on the representations of the landlord that you thought you could go in without a search warrant?
Based on how I understood the law.
Yep. Okay. You said that you found certain pieces of evidence during that second search, and that has been sent off for testing. Has that testing been completed as of today?
No.
So we don't know what evidentiary value it has, at least at this time.
Correct, in terms of DNA analysis.
When you were how is that evidence different than the evidence that you procured during your first search?
How is it different?
Correct.
Due to me not having a working knowledge of being able to determine whose DNA is which. Obviously, it was sent off to potentially verify whose DNA it was. The other thing is that the amount of blood saturation that was found was in a potential 4.5 to 5 foot diameter, which was consistent with that of the victim.
When you had an opportunity at the during the first execution of the search warrant to move that furniture, you could have done that, right?
Yes.
There was nothing stopping you, right?
Correct.
And so you don't feel that does that mean that the very first search you didn't think was very thorough and you needed a second search?
No, just those things weren't visible to the naked eye at the time.
So why do you need to do a second search if your first search is valid?
Why?
Yeah, why do you need to do a second search?
For the reasons of being as thorough as possible in an investigation. I had the ability to reprocess the scene based on consent without having to have a search warrant. During the course of the investigation, I had over a month of knowing more facts and knowledge of this actual incident. There were still things such as that we were still looking for. At the time, I didn't know that the victim was handcuffed at the time of death, or at least transported as such. So we went back looking for more potential physical evidence, such as a handcuff key or other items such as that. There was more knowledge that I had at that time that would lead me to potentially more evidence that I was looking for. So yes, there was potentially could be new evidence, and I do believe that we did find some.
And that evidence that you acquired on the second search is different than the first, or you believe that it will be different than the first?
It is different because we didn't collect.
One moment here.
No further questions.
Yes, Your Honor, briefly. So we testified within how many meters would Mr. Chen have had to have been in that location around 110 Tremont Street? How many would he have had to have been for it to show him in that location?
The accuracy of the records at the time would have been a high confidence. He hit for some points would have been 100 meters or less.
Okay. And Mr. Weiss asked you, there's no concrete proof that Mr. Chen went back to his apartment, correct?
Correct.
You said, no, there's no concrete proof, right?
Correct.
Oh, where's the photo exhibits?
Oh, I'm sorry.
And we saw some of these photos today. Looks like exhibits 11 through 28 that Mr. Weiss showed you and then compared to body cam footage. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So what Mr. Weiss has so kindly done and put together for us is that there was a change in the apartment from the time patrol entered in the early morning hours of November 27th to when the search warrant was executed, right?
Correct.
And we also know that within that day, Mr. Chen's within 100 meters of his apartment building, correct?
Correct.
So wouldn't you agree now that you've seen this? Wouldn't you agree that actually corroborates him being at his apartment that items were moved?
Objection, speculation.
There's some degree of speculation. You can ask it a different way, Jen.
Okay. You would agree based on the comparison between the photos from crime scene and the body cam footage that now we can be more sure that someone had to have been in that house, right?
Correct.
know if, do you know how crime scene got into the apartment? How they entered, or went once, I guess, instead of crime scene, how did a person, the first law enforcement officer that entered upon execution of the search warrant, do you know how they got in the apartment?
Yes.
How?
Officer Clemens, who's the courtesy officer for that complex, he responded to the scene with a master key to unlock the front door.
Oh, he had a key.
Correct.
Okay, so if you were gonna go in that apartment between when patrol left on the 27th and when the search warrant was executed, you must had to have had a key.
You have a problem with this.
Briefly, let's touch on consent. You stated that you had consent from Wise Properties to enter the apartment that once had belonged to Mr. Chen, correct?
Correct.
And you were questioned about, well, you were working off of the representations of the landlord. That's what Mr. Wise said, right? Well, anytime you get consent, you're basing it off of the representations of the party giving consent, right? So, for example, if you show up at a home where there's been a disorder, a woman walks out the door and she says, help me, someone's inside. She's saying, this is my home. If she says, this is my home, I live here, I give you consent to enter, you don't go back to the office and make sure that that's her address, right? Based on, using that analogy, you would trust that the person at the home is the property owner and they're giving you consent, or at least has a right to that property and is giving you consent, right? That's how consent works, correct? Nothing further.
Just one moment, if I may.
Investigator Crawford, we're trying to figure out who might have gone into this apartment. That's what we're doing, right? You're trying to make the contention that Jason Chen went back into his apartment, right? That's what's happening right here.
I'm answering questions.
Right, yeah. So the state's contention when they're asking you is that Mr. Chen came in here and went back to his apartment, moved everything around, put a knife on the bed, opened up all the cabinets. Is that what you're accusing Mr. Chen of doing?
He has the ability, based on location, and obviously physical access to gain entry to that apartment, and that you have the ability to do this.
Do you have Jason Chen's cell phone?
Yes.
Is that in evidence?
Correct.
Are you able to do a data download of that?
It's part of the
Is there GPS data located in that?
most of that time frame, a lot of things were deleted.
But in that cell phone, it doesn't show that he went to his apartment though, right?
Most cellular downloads do not contain GPS location based on that.
I just want to make sure that there's no other data here that actually puts Jason Chen in his apartment, right?
Data? No.
Now, we do know who was in that apartment between Officers Brayson and Creighton and you executing the search warrant, right?
Who's in there between those hours?
Correct.
We have testimony that people there.
Multiple people entered.
Correct.
Katrina Pace entered.
Correct.
And we know that she was in there because she said she was, right?
Well, we believe she was in there based on her testimony.
There were two, are you aware of there being any spare keys to this apartment?
I have no idea in terms of how many keys were made for the apartment.
Did you collect any spare keys to enter into this apartment?
I'm not aware.
When Katrina Pace said that she entered, she said the door was unsecured, correct?
Correct.
And we knew that to not be true, right? She admitted to that.
She admitted to that, well, I believe her testimony is that when she came to the door, it was unlocked. She is not the person that potentially unlocked that door. I do think she testified to later going back and potentially gaining access.
You don't know whether or not Katrina Pace locked the door after her last time there, do you? You don't know if she left it unlocked. And you said a courtesy officer came out with a master key to open it?
Correct.
I didn't hear any testimonies. Was the door locked?
Yes.
Who can verify that it was actually locked?
Yes, Officer Clemens, when he used the key to enter his apartment.
Okay. There's not a chance that he might have used the key to open an unlocked door?
I didn't unlock the door, so I have not.
Did you check to see if the door was locked?
I can tell you that when I was there, when the door was to shut, people did not have access from outside.
And the door shuts automatically, right? It's on
It does
hinge.
have automatic closure latches. I wouldn't say it closes automatically because sometimes depending on how far back the door was, it would not close all the way. We actually had to, during the processing of the scene, had to leave it easy close so it wouldn't shut and lock.
Does it lock automatically?
It was at the time when we were doing the search warrant first.
So that whole thing just now, if the door locks automatically, that means Katrina Pace might have not locked the door, Jason Chen might not have locked the door. It just happens automatically, right?
I have no idea.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Nothing further, Judge.
Just make sure I didn't miss anything. You talked about how when you went back in January, there was additional evidence under where the bed would have been, correct?
That's right.
And under where the tile was?
Correct.
You mentioned a headboard. Was there any additional evidence on that, or was that just something to describe something?
So we did take more pictures of the headboard. It was partially dismantled. And what we did during that reprocessing of the crime scene at that time, after collecting the carpet, the subflooring, and taking further swabs of the wood flooring, we also collected tiles, major 12 by 12 tiles with grout. After those items were collected, I then observed something on the far wall, like an oil stain consistent with, I know, a headboard, based on the back of your head rubbing up against the wall. It appeared to be an oil stain similar to that. Once I noticed that, we actually took the bed frame that I observed to be the same bed frame as before, based on blood evidence that was found on one side. It appeared to be the same as the one we looked at in November. We reconfigured that bed to then match up to see that we knew that at one point in time that headboard matched specifically with oil stain on the wall. So we did take further pictures and document the scene a little bit better. And at that point, they changed the light bulbs out, so we had better lighting. We were able to see things a little bit better because we used to have almost a blue light bulb. This time it was better.
Thank you. Can you redirect or reprocess on what I asked?
No, Your Honor.
Just briefly. So I'm confused how that's different than your first search. When you conducted your first search, did you go into the bathroom?
Did I go in the bathroom?
Yes.
Yes.
And you collected evidence from the tile,
From the top side.
from the grout?
From the top side.
In the shower, didn't you get samples from the grout?
I did not observe any blood samples from the ground shower.
But if you saw your report on the investigation and you saw that samples were taken from the grout, would you be surprised?
No, I know swabs were taken of the grout, but because the blood went under the grout in different locations, based on the different locations since I didn't originally see it, it was different evidence. Because I did not know at the time that blood was soaked through that specific grout.
Okay, so on the first search, you did take swabs of grout,
Correct.
and you took swabs of tile.
They would have been probably the same swab.
Okay. And then you, on the carpet in the bedroom, you removed sections of that carpet because you believe it contained blood, correct?
Small section.
You went back on the second time, January 5th, and collected, albeit the physical evidence this time and not just swabs, you collected the physical evidence that you had swabbed earlier.
No.
It's not different evidence.
The tiles that were recovered, there were multiple tiles, and multiple tiles had blood under them. So I can't testify that we swabbed that specific tile that had the grout under. I'm probably not even able to determine if it was the same tile or a different tile because it had already broken up off the ground. And based on the falling out of the grout, I think it'd be pretty tough to determine if that was the exact same tile that we swabbed prior. The same way with, I know the carpet, we did not swab and we did not take a section of that specific carpet out of the original system.
Well, you took multiple swab or multiple patches of carpet, didn't you?
In different locations.
And you expected to find the victim's DNA?
Correct.
Okay. And when you did the second search, were you looking for the same thing, victim's DNA?
Well, I knew those items were going to be there because they sent me pictures of the saturated carpet prior to my arrival.
Were you conducting that search to find the victim's DNA?
I was collecting evidence of the crime. I wasn't doing it specifically. I think the major blood on the carpeted area actually shows potentially a form of a person. It shows a potential area. So it could potentially show a size of an individual that was in that area. The grout itself, yes, would the blood show have DNA? Yes. Could that potentially come back? We don't know. To the victim, yes. But I believe it also shows the amount of saturation and blood loss in this specific investigation to show that it not only saturated through 2 subpoenas to the bottom. I think it also shows that based on the saturation through the grout, 2 to 3, and potentially 4 inches in some directions shows the amount of blood loss. I think it's further evidence of the case, not just DNA.
And so you had an opportunity to get all that from your first search, but it wasn't thorough enough, and that's why you needed the second search. You needed to be more thorough because based on the new information that you had received.
I wouldn't say it's because we weren't thorough. It wasn't visible to the naked eye at that point in time. We just didn't know that it was there.
Had you moved the bed, would that have been visible to the naked eye?
No, because the top part of the carpet had been cleaned. The reasoning, the original section that was cut out of the carpet, those were 2 locations where it wasn't clean as well.
And you wouldn't, do you expect to find different evidence from your, I know the testing hasn't come back from the second search. Do you expect it to be different?
Do I expect it to be different in terms of what?
Do you expect it to not be Jasmine Pace's DNA?
I hope not.
Thanks, sir.
Nothing further, Judge.
Thank you, Mr. Crawford. Thank you.
No, the defense has no further questions.
Stay calling with.
Yes, Your Honor, the state will call Cassidy Buffington. She may be in the lobby of my office, deputies.
Your Honor, I misspoke. I might have rebuttal witnesses based on it.
swear from the testimony about to give the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Hi, Ms. Buffington. Can you state your full name for the court's record?
Yes, it is Cassidy Buffington.
Okay, and Ms. Buffington, can you tell the court what you do for a living?
I am a property manager.
For who?
Wise Properties.
Okay, and as a property manager for Wise Properties, what does that job entail?
I manage all of our parking communities we have in Chattanooga. All the maintenance, the rentals, the leasing, all of that.
How many apartment complexes does Wise Properties have in Chattanooga?
60.
Okay. Is one of those properties located at 110 Tremont Street? What is the name of that apartment building?
Lopsit Tremont.
Okay. And in November of 2022, were you working at Wise Properties in the same position that you just described?
I was.
Okay. And in the course of that work, would you be familiar with leases at any of the properties that Wise Properties or Mr. Wise owns?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And is there multiple people that can go through a lease and have it signed by a lessee?
Yes.
Okay. How many people?
So we have 4 in our leasing office.
Okay.
5 including me.
Okay. And when those leases are done, are they stored in a location that they can be accessed by all of you?
Yes.
Can you describe that for the court?
Yes. So we actually have them. They're in our portal. So we use that fully for our software. So all of them are stored in the actual software. And then we have files that we keep that are also in office.
Okay, and do you have access to that portal and can at any given time look at someone's lease for any of the properties?
Yes.
Okay, and is the portal kept in the regular conduct of the business that Wise Properties does? Okay, and the same with lease agreements, are they also regularly kept business records?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm going to hand you a document, ask you to just look over it for a second.
Do you recognize this document, Ms. Buffington?
I do.
Okay, can you describe for the court what it is?
This is our standard lease agreement.
Okay, and for what property is that lease agreement assigned?
This one is for the Lopsit Tremont.
Okay, is there a specific apartment number?
There is. It is 110 Tremont Street, apartment 210.
Okay. Your Honor, the state would move to make this the next exhibit to this hearing. 29. Yes, 29. All right, Ms. Buffington, can you grab Exhibit 29 again? Is the language in this agreement similar to the language in all agreements that Wise Properties uses for lease agreements? Okay. And you'll, if you can, please turn to page 3 of the agreement. There are 2 names with what looks like initials noted there. Can you describe what that is?
Yes, that is so you have to initial each page. That is where the leasee would be initial, and then they would sign that.
Okay, and in this case, you can see that there are 2. Is that correct?
Correct.
And I guess you can go back to page 1 in the first section, which would be 1.1. Who was the lessee, or who were the 2 lessees for this property?
That would be Chen and Min Chen.
Okay, and what date was this lease effective?
It looks like July 15, 2022.
Okay. And for what period of a term was this lease?
12 months.
Okay. And then if you will go to page 4 of the lease agreement.
There's an image for it.
That's my fault. Your Honor, this is page 4 of the lease agreement, so I'll just ask that it be attached to Exhibit 29.
No objection. You only want to stick with that.
Yes, sir.
So now you can turn to page 4. And whose signatures are those?
You would have Jason Chen, then Chen as a co-signer, and then Mary Jane Martin, which is my assistant manager.
Okay, and in this section, is this what the parties have to sign to, as evidence that they've read the agreement and they agree to everything that's in this rental agreement?
That's correct.
Okay, I'm gonna draw your attention to section 1.9. States use of premises. We'll go about 3/4 the way down. You would agree that this lease states that the lessee shall not permit any objectionable noise or odors to escape from the unit, or to permit or create a nuisance, or to disturb any other resident in the building, or in any way injure the reputation of the lessor or the building itself. Is that correct? Is that language you're familiar with? Okay. And then section 1.10 speaks of lessee damages. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And this section basically says that a lessee can be on the hook for any damage they do to their property or their apartment.
That's correct.
Okay, at the time that they move out or are evicted or the lease is terminated?
Yes.
Okay. Section 1.18. This is an interesting section. Is this in all the leases that you all? Can you read this section 1.18, abandonment to the court?
Yes, the lessee must notify the lessor of any anticipated extended absence from the premises in the excess of 7 days. Notice shall be given on or before the first day of the extended absence in writing. Should lessee fail to notify the lessor shall be authorized to enter the unit to inspect it, and if it appears that the lessee has vacated the unit, the lessor shall have the right to take possession of the unit. Remove and store all personal premises for 30 days, and thereafter dispose of said personality and apply that the proceeds for the sale to the unpaid rents, damages, storage fees, sale costs, court costs, and attorney fees.
Okay, so this basically covers when an apartment could be abandoned by a lessee, it would then revert back to Wise Properties.
That is correct.
And then 1.20 states the last sentence of section 1.20 states the lessee further agrees to leave the premises in as good a condition as he accepted it, excepting normal wear and tear. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then the last one is 1.24 on page 3. Notices.
Yes, ma'am.
Any notices required to be served upon the lessee may be served by conventional mail or delivered to the lessee at the leased premises, or may be posted on the front door of the apartment. Any notices to be delivered to the lessor or his agent should be sent to the following address, and that gives the apartment address. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so Mr. Chen has initialed on page 3. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And his, Min Chen. Do you know who Min Chen is to Mr. Chen?
The co-signer
Uh-huh.
of the apartment.
Do you know
My
who?
understanding it was his father.
Okay. And then they would have to sign, not just initial, but also sign on page 4, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Which they did. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And is it common for Wise Properties to use this lease agreement to hold lessees accountable?
Yes, ma'am.
Was there a point in time, Ms. Buffington, that you became aware of a situation at 110 Tremont Street that involved a possible crime committed in apartment 210?
Yes, ma'am.
When did you learn of that?
It was the end of November of 2022.
Okay. And what did you learn?
We learned that he had been arrested as a potential for murder of a young lady.
Okay. And when you say he, do you mean Jason Chen?
Jason Chen.
Okay. And being the property manager at Wise Properties, what did you then do knowing that information?
So immediately I contacted our attorney, Patrick Wagner, and advised him of the situation, and that's when we had decided that a 3-day eviction would need to be set.
Okay. And is a 3-day eviction, is that typical? And I don't think you've had many incidents like this, but have you seen a 3-day termination notice be done before?
I have, yes.
In what situations?
Depending on threatening residents, if there are any kind of harm to a resident or harassment, anything to that matter.
And to your knowledge, what has to happen to that 3-day notice for the lessee to have official notice pursuant to the lease that we just went through?
So we post the door of the 3-day notice, and then they have 3 days to vacate the premises and return the keys of the apartment.
Okay. And is that a notice that is written by you or someone at Wise Properties or an attorney?
Our attorney, Patrick Wagner.
Okay. Does he always write that notice for you? Okay. And did he in this case?
He did.
And when he writes that notice to be posted on the lessee's door, are those records kept by Wise Properties?
They are.
Are they kept in a similar portal or the same portal?
We keep them in the actual leasee's file.
Okay, and those files are kept in the regular course of the business that Wise Properties does. Do you have access to those files?
I do not.
Okay.
Ask that you take a moment to look over that.
Do you recognize that document?
Yes, ma'am.
What is that document?
That is his 3-day termination that our attorney had typed out.
Okay. Can you, beginning with notice, I apologize, Judge, we've moved this into evidence as exhibit number 29, 30. Is it 30? 30.
No, here.
I'm going to ask you to begin reading at the word notice that's capitalized and just try to read slowly so that the court can follow because he doesn't have it in front of him.
I am the attorney for the landlord/property manager, Tremont Apartments LLC, pursuant to TCA 66-28-517, A1 and 2, as well as your lease agreement. Your tenancy will terminate on 12/30/2022, and you must vacate promptly. On or about 11/29/2022, police arrested you for the alleged homicide of Jasmine Pace. Witnesses reported that a violent event occurred at your unit in the early morning hours of November 23, 2022. You allegedly committed a violent act in the premises. You constitute a real and present danger to the health, safety, and welfare of other residents, and you are in violation of the above cited Tennessee law and your lease agreement. You will not be permitted to remain. Failure to vacate on or before the aforementioned date may result in filing of an unlawful detainer, eviction, action against
If we have to charge our
an attorney's fees. If you or your attorney, if you obtain one, need to contact me to confirm that you have vacated, I can be reached at 423-756-7923. All rights reserved. Sincere Wagner Leaks. Patrick A. Wagner, Esquire.
Okay, so is there a date on the top of this letter?
There is. Yes, ma'am.
What is that date?
November 30th, 2022.
And it states, as you just read, that the lease will terminate on 12/3/2022. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So that would be the 3 days that this notice is giving, 3 days notice from the 30th to the 3rd that Mr. Chen would have to be out of that apartment. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Are you familiar with TCA 66-28-517?
I'm a little bit familiar, but yes, so. I usually let him handle it, so I'm not going to quote it.
Okay, all right, that's okay. Real briefly, what is a cosigner?
So they would be a guarantor of a lease. So if the leasee is not able to pay the rent or causes an issue, then it kicks back to the cosigner or guarantor that would be responsible to withhold the lease agreement.
Okay. So this notice was posted on Mr. Chen's door, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And then just in terms of a timeline, based on your recollection and knowledge, what happened next with Mr. Chen's apartment 210?
So to my knowledge, dates, I'm not 100%, so don't quote me on any dates, but we had received, of course, a phone call from the police department. Our courtesy officer had went over. They wanted us to change the locks on the apartment. So we had set our maintenance supervisor over to change the locks on the apartment to secure the crime scene, is what they had told us. After that, we did not have any access to the apartment whatsoever, until they had contacted our courtesy officer again, letting them know that we have possession back. Once that point happened, we went back, had the keys, and then, Jason Chen's attorney, Mr. Weiss, yes, had contacted our attorney about getting a key for possession because the co-signer would like to go in and get Jason Chen's belongings that were all still in the apartment.
Okay, so Mr. Weiss contacted you to ask for the new key to the new lock so that the co-signer, Min Chen, could go back in for belongings.
Correct.
Okay. And what did you do at that point?
I advised him that Min Chen would have to be present. We would check ID since he is the co-signer. He does have access to that apartment belongings if he wanted to remove Mr. Chen's items out.
Okay.
So
And did you confer with Mr. Wagner, the counsel for Wise Properties, before you did this?
Yes.
Okay. And so did you in fact give Mr. Chen, Min Chen, the keys to the apartment as they had been changed?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then at some point, did you let Mr. Min Chen know that he had to return those keys to you?
Yes, ma'am. When we gave him the keys on the day that he came to pick them up, yes.
You told him that they'd have to be returned to the property management office. And did he do that?
To my knowledge, yes.
Okay. And when you say to your knowledge, what does that mean?
I don't remember how long or the dates exactly, but we did receive keys back, yes.
Okay. From Min Chen?
Yes.
Okay. And then after that, what was the plan in terms of Weiss Properties? What do you do with an apartment like this? You've given termination notice. The person's come and got whatever belongings they want. The co-signer did. Then what do you do?
So once we received the keys back from Mr. Chen, then it was up to us to go and assess the damage of the actual apartment once we got possession back of it. So when that happens in a situation to this, we usually contact any biohazard cleanup or anything. So we had met over at the apartment, assessed any damages. Of course, there was damages from when the police had been in there. So there was certain things that we knew we were going to have to replace anyway. So we had met the biohazard cleanup over there, the company over there, assessed all damages on what it was going to be, and then we go in. Usually I have to get approval from my owner, John Wise, for an extent of amount of money that it was going to cost to put the apartment back in its original condition from the damage.
Did you do that? Did you notify Mr. John Weiss in this case?
I did.
Do you recall the amount that it was going to cost, like the estimate?
I don't recall off the top of my head. I want to say that just for the biohazard cleanup was roughly around $7,000.
And Mr. Weiss approved that?
He did.
Okay. And then to your knowledge, did the biohazard cleaning company begin work?
Just for clarification, we have Mr. Wise and Mr. Weiss, who's the landlord. I didn't approve it.
Did Mr. John Weiss, the owner of Weiss Properties, approve that the apartment could be cleaned for approximately $7,000?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And to your knowledge, I'll repeat my question. To your knowledge, did the cleaning company begin work?
They did.
And do you recall when that was?
I would say roughly the beginning of January of 2023.
Okay.
Somewhere in that area.
And did you receive any type of communication from them after they began their cleaning?
I did.
What was that?
I did. They had notified me to let me know that there was small areas that had been cut out of the carpet that appeared to be blood that the crime scene had taken. But when they went to move the bed, unfortunately, there was a lot more and he didn't want to touch it. So I had then contacted Detective Crawford.
Okay. To let Detective Crawford know that there was maybe more evidence?
Just wanted to make sure he had all of the spaces because we didn't want to rip it out in case something had happened.
Okay. And did the Chattanooga Police Department, in fact, come back to the apartment?
They did, yes.
Did they 0 of Exhibit 29 talks about lessee damages. Was there a point at which Wise Properties had a conversation about actually charging Mr. Chen or the cosigner Min Chen for damages?
Was there a conversation with who?
Within Wise Properties?
Yes.
And what did that consist of?
So if anyone vacates and leaves any damages, they are responsible for any damages, no matter what, other than wear and tear, of course, naturally. So as soon as we process any damages, we do a final account statement, and then they are then responsible for damage costs. And we let them know. We send them we email it or mail it.
Was that done in this case?
Yes.
Was that sent to Mr. Min Chen, the cosigner?
Yes.
And do you recall the total of those damages?
I do not.
Okay. Was it in the thousands of dollars?
Yes. It was over 20,000. I want to say roughly 20 to 25 off the top of my head.
And did Mr. Min Chen, as the cosigner, agree to pay any of that?
He did.
Do you know how much he paid?
All of it.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you know when he paid that?
I would roughly say maybe June, July of 23, somewhere in that.
Okay.
timeframe.
Did he pay it in increments or did he pay lump sum?
Lump sum.
At the time, let's go back to December, before the cleaning company came, but after the locks were changed, Mr. Min Chen gives the keys back to you that he had retrieved, right?
Correct.
At that point in time, would Mr. Min Chen or Mr. Jason Chen have been free to go inside that apartment?
No.
They were no longer able to, and in fact, they were legitimately no longer able to get in because they didn't have the key, right?
Correct.
But it was no longer Mr. Chen's apartment because he had been evicted via this termination notice.
That is correct.
Okay. And even though the lump sum was not paid until June for the damages to the apartment, from December to June, certainly Mr. Chen, Min Chen, or Jason Chen wouldn't have had access to the property, correct?
No, ma'am.
And it would have been unlawful for them to try to gain access, correct?
That is correct.
Nothing further, Judge.
Good morning, ma'am. Is it Miss Buffington? Good morning, or good afternoon, Miss Buffington. I'm Joshua Weiss. I represent Jason Chen. Have we ever met before?
We have met maybe once.
You look familiar. It's my understanding that Jason Chen rented an apartment from your organization.
Correct.
And he paid money for that, and he signed a lease agreement. There's no question that Jason Chen had a valid lease agreement with your company.
No.
Okay, and he lived there, correct?
He did.
And do you have personal knowledge that he did live there?
I do not. I actually have never met him before.
But is it your understanding that he did live there?
Yes.
Okay, and according to the lease agreement, there's no subletting allowed unless there's permission.
That is correct.
And there is no record of him subletting this to anyone else. Do you know if he kept his stuff there?
I would assume so.
And then having a lease agreement means that he can invite whomever he wants to invite over to his apartment, right?
That is correct.
And he can exclude anyone that he wants to exclude
That is correct.
because he has possessory interest.
Yes.
Now, you talked about the letter posted on Mr. Chen's door. There's no doubt that he never saw that, right?
Correct.
He was in custody when that was posted on his door,
Yes.
or
To my knowledge, yes.
around that same time frame. You don't know if he ever saw that,
I do
correct?
not.
So according to that letter that she read out loud, you said, a part of the letter says, failure to vacate on or before the aforementioned date may result in the filing of an unlawful detainer, quote, eviction, action against you, removed from the premises and may be liable for all court costs and attorney's fees. I might have butchered that, but that's essentially what it says, right? Okay. So even though you post this on someone's door, if they don't vacate, you have to go to the courts, correct?
Correct.
And even if they do vacate, most of the time, they still go to the courts, correct? Because you want a legal order that says they have no possessory interest in that property anymore. Okay. May I approach, Your Honor? Can you identify the piece of paper that I'm showing you?
Yes, it appears to be a document filed in court for Tremont Apartments LLC against Jason Chen.
Is that your organization that you work for?
Tremont Apartments, yes.
Okay. And did Mr. Wagner file that for you?
Yes.
And are you familiar with this lawsuit?
As far as the eviction?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell me when that was filed?
January 12th, 2023.
May I approach again, Your Honor?
Issued on 12/6, I'm sorry.
Well, let me approach one more time.
Okay.
Would it be helpful if you knew that there was a time and date stamp when these were filed? You might have to
Actually cannot read that.
Could you see December 5th? Would that be right?
Yes, of 2022, yes.
Okay. And then it was issued the next day, December 6th, 2023?
Yes.
Okay. And you do this so that way you can regain legal possession back of the property.
That is correct, yes.
What happened to that case? Can you read there at the bottom?
Which section? Dismissed.
And
Dismissed.
and who dismissed it?
That would have to be my attorney.
Okay. So Wise Properties or Tremont Apartments, they dismissed this case. And they dismissed this case because if that had gone down as a judgment, you wouldn't be able to recover any of the damages from the apartment, right?
I just needed possession back of the apartment,
So the lawsuit there was dismissed. Did you attempt to rent out the apartment after that?
After all damages, yes.
When did you rent out the apartment?
It took a while. Unfortunately, we did not have a lot of interest in anyone wanting to live in the apartment due to the circumstances that they had heard happen. So I don't exactly know when the first tenant moved in after he had vacated.
I forgot, Your Honor. I'd like to introduce the civil detainer warrant as exhibit. Are we at 31?
31. No.
May I approach again now? Can you tell the court what this document is?
Yes, this is a list of damages and a receipt showing that it had been paid in full.
And this is a payment receipt from Wise Properties.
That is correct.
I see that you charged $1,900 for an early lease term, or I'm sorry, there was a $1,900 fee for lease termination.
That is correct.
$1,357 for insufficient notice.
Correct.
And then if we skip down to the very last thing, rent loss due to not being able to lease the apartment due to what happened. Did I read that correct?
Yes.
And so all the rent was paid that Mr. Chen was liable to pay had he lived there the entire time.
Correct.
During that period of time, did you rent out the apartment?
No.
Okay, so any rental came after July of 2023?
Yes.
Okay. And so you say Jason Chen couldn't re-enter that apartment after December, correct?
Correct.
But he paid the rent all the way through his entire lease term, correct?
So this is how long it took us to put the apartment back into habitable conditions for the new tenant.
So you charged him a lease termination fee and
The 6 months.
the loss of rent.
Yes.
But why do you get both?
Well, so because of the issues that had happened, it really hurt our reputation on the property. So the owner of the company, John Wise, he wanted to regain some of the loss for the cost that it took us to get possession back to be able to re-rent the apartment.
Okay. So that's what we're just calling a lease termination fee?
Yes, well, so it was, yes, rent loss due to having to put it back because of the damages, yes.
And have you ever heard of the Uniform Residential Landlord Tenant Act?
Yes,
And do you have to know that as part of your job?
I do.
Okay. Does that comply with the Universal Residential Tenant Landlord Act?
I don't feel comfortable answering that. I don't want to
I'm sorry.
incriminate any of myself or whatever. I was just doing what I was told and advised to do.
Are you supposed to do that under the law?
No.
When did you change the locks on the apartment?
When the police had contacted us to let us know that we could have possession back of the apartment.
Would Jason Chen have a copy of a key that would open the door?
Before the locks were changed?
After the locks were changed.
Not to my knowledge.
What about his father?
His father would have been able to come and get a copy of the key after we had changed the locks, when they gave possession back to the apartment.
Okay, and do you know who returned the key?
I do not. I wasn't present when the key was returned.
Okay, so you don't know if it was Mr. Chen's father or not?
I do not.
Your Honor, I'd like to introduce the payment receipt as exhibit number 32.
No.
Just one moment, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Buffington. I have no further questions.
Ms. Buffington, did Mr. Josh Weiss, the attorney here, did he ever contact you to let you know that his client wanted to maintain his residency in that apartment building?
No, he had contacted me, letting me know that the co-signer would like to have access to his belongings.
Okay, but you never heard from him, and he never said, no, this is my client's apartment, he's going to stay here.
No.
He never contacted you saying, hey, we want to go back in January or February or March or April or May? Okay. And in section 1.9 of the lease agreement, you mentioned something like this a second ago, but the lessee agreed to not in any way injure the reputation of the lessor or the building itself. And when you said that had been done in this case, you mean that there's an alleged murder in Mr. Chen's apartment,
That is correct.
which damaged the reputation of the property.
Very much.
And when you said you had met Mr. Weiss once before, when was that?
That was when he had came and got a key with the Chen.
So he was present when Mr. Minchin came to get a key to go into the property to get whatever property of Mr. Chen's was left in there.
That's correct.
Mr. Weiss was there with him that day.
I don't know if he was at the apartment, but he did come into the office, yes.
Did he have the key?
Mr. Chen got the key.
But Mr. Weiss was in the office.
Yes.
Nothing further, Judge.
Just one moment.
No further questions.
Thank you, Buffington. Any release of consent?
No, Your Honor.
Any rebuttal from the defense?
Can we approach, Your Honor?
Yes, sir. We're going to take a break. It's 5 minutes after 1 by that clock. We'll stand in recess until that clock says 2:15. Come back at that point. Mr. Weiss, if you wish to call your rebuttal witnesses, certainly at that point. If you don't want to, we'll argue the merits of the section 1 to your motion.
Thank you, Judge.
Thank Yes, sir.
Your Honor, for Monica Davis, she's still here. We are joining you from the News Channel 9 Streaming Center now, talking about what you just saw in the hearing for Jason Chen. We're going to pause some other court hearings are going on there. So, what did we just see in this hearing? This was a hearing to talk about possibly suppressing some of the evidence that was found in the suspect, Jason Chen's apartment, when police went in after it was determined that Jasmine Pace was missing. The reason that this motion was filed all comes down to a couple of things. One of them was that Jasmine Pace's family members, as they were trying to find her, went into Jason Chen's apartment at some point. The defense argues that they took items, that they moved items around, and that could change how this case plays out. I do want to play for you a clip now that was played in court. It's an investigator talking to Katrina Pace, Jasmine Pace's mother, at some point before they found her body. And he's talking about looking for the evidence, what they found. Take a listen, and then we'll talk about what it says.
Save someone's life, that's what's going to happen. And if we have to say that the criminal investigation gets thrown out because we have to jump through hoops, and ultimately things happen where we basically don't pull the wall, but we skip through hoops instead of preservation of life is first and foremost.
That's my first and foremost.
Is
that you, Investigator Crawford?
It is.
So what you just heard there, that was a CPD investigator, Investigator Crawford. And he's talking to Katrina Pace, Jasmine Pace's mother. And he's telling her, apparently from the recording, that he's willing to tarnish an investigation if that means bringing Jasmine Pace back alive. Now, you'll remember her family, police weren't sure where she was at that point. Her family received a ping from around Jason Penn's apartment, and they were able to go there at one point. That's how they went into that apartment. But there's a lot of discussion in court today about whether police went through the appropriate hoops, per se, to get a search warrant, and then whether they did the right things when they tried to get that affidavit for that search warrant. Let's back up just a second. Let's go through a little bit of a timeline here with the Jasmine Pace case. You can see there, November of 2022, the last time that Jasmine Pace is seen by her mother. Then Jasmine Pace's car arrives at Jason Chen's apartment last night or late at night. The next day, Jasmine texts her mother a pinpoint of her location early in the morning. That same day, security footage shows Jason Chen at the Signal Mountain Walmart purchasing items like bandages and peroxide. November 27th, we're skipping a few days there. Police confirm that Jasmine Pace was entered as missing into the NCIS. November 27th. In the early morning hours, Pace family members took items from Chen's apartment. So now we're getting to the part where this hearing is really drilling into. On that same day, a search warrant was issued for Chen's apartment. Chen, on November 30th, was brought to Hamilton County after being detained by police in Nolensville, Tennessee, outside of Nashville. That's where his parents live. So that's where they were able to find him, according to police. And then December 1st, Jasmine Pace's remains were found. So we go from November around the 23rd to December 1st, where both police and Jasmine Pace's family don't know where she is, according to testimony. They're doing everything that they can to try to find her. And, you know, Katrina Pace, Jasmine Pace's mother, has testified before that she was willing to do whatever she needed to see if her daughter was still alive. let's look at some of the pictures that were shown today in court. These are CPD investigator photos of Jason Chen's apartment. You can see there a TV, a futon, you can see a coffee table, and then in the right-handed picture, a bed and a notebook. And why that became important is because then the defense showed these pictures. And this is the difference, they say, from when the first officers went into the apartment and then when other officers, after they got a search warrant later that same day, went into the apartment. And they're pointing out differences here. So you can see the cabinets in one picture are open or closed. Items have been moved on the table. Items have been moved on the couch. You can also see things just in different areas. These were not the only pictures they showed about how things in the apartment had changed. And what they were really drilling down to in this hearing was who might have moved those. They're trying to determine, did the family of Jasmine Pace move them when they were in there looking for items that might have helped them find Jasmine Pace? One of the CPD investigators was asked if law enforcement would have moved them. He said no, they would have not, because they would know that would possibly make the crime scene complicated when it went to trial. And then the defense was asking how they didn't know it was Jason Chen, who had, according to his cell phone records, left town and then come back into town. And then his cell phone records showed he was within, I believe, 100 yards, they said, of his apartment. So they were trying to say possibly he moved those items there. And so, again, what the arguments seem to be showing here is that they're talking about is what police found in the apartment, is it tarnished by other people being in that apartment between those two times? Are they compromised, and can they be used in court to show something? So again, this is not a trial. This is a motions hearing to see what can be allowed in the trial. And again, this is motions brought by the defense to talk about what, when they go to trial, they can be added in. Jordan Carn back in now. Jordan was in this hearing today, as well as multiple hearings in the past. Jordan, I want to talk to you first about just what it was like in that courtroom. We know it's been emotional in the past. What was it like there today?
Yeah, definitely. It definitely was emotional in the past, but today was relatively calm given, the topic that we're talking about. The courtroom wasn't completely packed, but Chen's family was present, and some of Jasmine Pace's family was present as well. But the attorney who's representing the Pace family let us know that Katrina Pace, Jasmine's mother, wasn't able to actually make it today because her flight got canceled.
Okay. Some of the things we were talking about, just how closely people have followed this case, how much of this hearing is talking about who was in that apartment and at what time. We were just looking with the viewers here at some of the pictures they showed of items that have possibly been moved. Just give us your, just from hearing this in court, what those pictures kind of showed and what the court was able to see from those.
Yeah, so like you mentioned, trying to figure out who entered the apartment was actually a strong basis around today's discussion. So I can kind of go over some key points that we learned. The defendant argued that from when patrol entered to when a search warrant was executed, that there had been some changes in the apartment, like you mentioned, some of those being, a pillow was moved. There was also a notebook that looked like it had been placed on the bed, as well as a visible knife laying on the bed. I mean, in the first photo, you weren't able to really see the knife. And then in that second photo, it was pretty visible to the naked eye. And then Detective Crawford, who was the lead detective on this case, said he actually obtained Chen's cell phone data and saw that he was actually within 100 meters or less of the North Shore apartment where he lived on Tremont Street before law enforcement had secured the scene, saying that, he would have had the ability to enter his apartment and move things around. But the defendant argued that anyone could have entered the apartment, including the private investigator.
Right. And Jordan, this, like we said when we first started this is not the first hearing in this case. This has been going on for quite a while, and you've been in the courtroom for all of these.
Yeah, that's right. We've definitely been following along, and a lot of different people have testified. What I thought interesting today was they even called the property manager of the building at Tremont Street. Weiss Properties is the people who own that building, and they said, after they learned of Chen's arrest back in November, they gave him a 3-day eviction from the apartment to return the keys, saying he was a danger to others. Another key point that I thought was interesting was they said that a cleaning company began cleaning the apartment after his eviction in January, and they found a small area cut out of that carpet that the crime scene had taken initially, but when the cleaning company went to move the bed, they actually found a lot more saturated blood. So they contacted Detective Crawford back, and that's what prompted that second search of the apartment. And during that second search, Detective Crawford said, there was blood saturation in the master bedroom, under the tile in the bathroom. And they also mentioned that the headboard had been partially dismantled, and some of that DNA analysis has actually still not been tested.
Okay, Jordan. And where are we at in the process for today's hearing at this point? Kind of what happens next?
So that's about where we stopped, but we're going to continue with witness testimony, I believe, and we'll continue to keep you updated with everything that goes on from here when we go back into the courtroom.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Thanks for covering that. You'll be on your social media, and then a report tonight on News Channel 9 at 5 and 6. Thanks a lot, Jordan.
Thank you. Bye.
So again, that Jasmine Pace and Jason Chen suspect hearing on a break for lunch. We're going to wrap up here in our News Channel 9 streaming center, and then we'll bring you more of the stream after court comes back into session at around 2:15. In the meantime, you can go to newschannel9.com and see all of our background stories and information about the Jasmine Pace disappearance and the trial and the hearings following Jason Chen as he works his way through the court system. Again, as Jordan said, lots of emotion and attention in the Chattanooga area surrounding this case, a young girl whose life was lost, and family members just, trying to get justice in the justice system here. So we'll continue to follow this, bring you more information as it happens from the News Channel 9 Stream Center. I'm Latricia Thomas. We'll see you later.